Part 56. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 566. When Muji said the name Mother, Musian was obviously stunned for a moment, and then secretly looked at the cute girl in front of him with strange eyes. Muwanji. He repeated softly, his eyes filled with doubt. What's wrong? Don't you believe what I say? Muji smiled and took Musian's arm, letting him sit on the throne not far in front, then walked around to his right thigh and sat down. The girl's weight is very light, so light that it can even be ignored, but you can still vaguely feel the softness of her delicate body. It is completely different from Musian's initial impression of the god who holds the power of life and death for all living things in the world. At least from Musian's most intuitive feeling now, if he didn't know Muji's true identity, it would be difficult for him to associate this girl with the forbidden land of life, a place that is feared and revered by monks. It's not that I don't believe what you say. Musian couldn't help but smile. I just don't believe that I really have parents. In fact, Musian has already doubted his life experience since he entered the Lianji sect and even from the series of events that happened later. If you think about it carefully, it seems that his whole life has been shrouded in the shadow of the original witch. The acquired Taoism, heaven, and even the system are closely related to the original witch. And he has never seen his parents even once, but he often heard them mentioned by guests at home when he was a child. Therefore, when he learned that he had parents, Musian felt a little incredible. So I'm not an orphan, Musian couldn't help but whisper to himself. Muji held her pink cheeks in her hands and looked up and down Musian's handsome face, as if observing his expression. Why do you have such strange doubts? You are a human, you must have been born, right? It is said that all the creatures in this world were originally made from clay by the immortal who ascended to the fairyland. Do you think you were created by her? There was a bit of ridicule in his words, and there was also confusion and doubt in his eyes. She couldn't understand why Musian would suspect such a thing. Musian really felt that it made sense, and said softly, if you want to say that, I really think it's not impossible. Legend has it that the fairy who ascended to the fairyland has the power to turn decay into magic. All creatures in the world are her children. It can be said that she opened up the chaos and created everything in Kyushu. If he were not in the world of immortals, Musian would have just listened to this. But the Ascension realm can go back in time, and even change what has happened if she wants, so, after ascending to immortality, even if she can pinch creatures with her bare hands, it is not impossible. When Muji heard this, she couldn't help but stretched out her little hand to gently touch his face, and suddenly said, have you always been resentful that your mother never came to you? Musian couldn't help but smile. I just don't believe what you said. You said you had met my mother, then where is she now? Muji was silent for a while. Actually, I haven't seen her for a long time. Musian looked like, look, it's true, and said, when was the last time you saw her? Muji put her fingertips in front of her pink lips, pondered for a few seconds, and said, it seems, more than 10 years ago. Musian was stunned for a moment. 10 years ago. This is a bit unexpected. I thought Muji would make up a story from a long time ago, but unexpectedly it was only more than 10 years ago. If it was more than 10 years ago, I remember correctly that he should have just been born in Tianqian City. Muji nodded lightly. She returned to the forbidden land of life more than 10 years ago, and she never came back after that. Musian suddenly remembered something important and asked, wait a minute, you just said that you had sucked my spiritual energy, so we met when we were children. Muji smiled and said, not only have I met you, I watched you grow up. There is no one in this world who understands you better than me. After all, when you were little, I secretly warmed up your veins every night. When Muji said this, there seemed to be a hint of reminiscence in her beautiful eyes. Speaking of which, you were very cute when you were a child. At that time, I knew that you would be particularly good looking when you grow up. When you were young. Did you have any strange habits? Musian couldn't hold himself any longer. Muji said matter-of-factly, I am Muwanj's adopted child, so of course I should help you, right? She stretched out her little hand and caressed it slowly from Musian's face, along his face and down his neck. Finally, she gently put her little hand on his chest and said quietly, I am like this, nourishing your veins with my own hands every day, otherwise, why do you think you were so talented when you were born? When she finished speaking, she raised her eyes and looked at Musian. She obviously looked cute, but the moment she met her beautiful black and white eyes, Musian suddenly felt that her heartbeat was speeding up uncontrollably. This girl's smile seemed to have a special magic power, just like the light gauze caresses the cheek, making one feel itchy. I know you won't believe what I say before you meet Muwanj, but you just need to remember that I am not your enemy. The soft whisper-like whisper lingered in the ears, revealing a charm that seemed to be heart-stirring. Musian calmed down slightly and asked, why don't I have the memory you mentioned? Muji shook her head, it's not that I don't have it, but someone has blocked the secret. Everything about me has been blocked, Muwanji's affairs have also been blocked. No one in this world will remember them. Musian was silent. He believed this. Because when he asked the will of heaven to check the information about Muji and him, he also didn't find the identity of their parents. This means that someone has indeed blocked the secret of his parents. You actually believe that I am your sister, right? The girl looked up at him with a smile. Seeing her cute and charming smile, Musian said, if you are shy, you don't have to pretend to be mature. Who is shy? I just need a little time to adapt. Musian suddenly exposed her true thoughts, and Muji's face flushed instantly. Especially when she sat in Musian's arms and felt the warm breath coming from him, a hint of shyness flashed across the girl's beautiful eyes. Afterwards, she puffed her cheeks slightly and glanced at Musian like a broken jar. I just didn't expect you to have grown so big, so sister needs to adapt a little more. What do you mean by adapt? Please explain it clearly, this sounds easy to cause misunderstanding. Musian silently complained in his heart. So you have secretly absorbed my spiritual energy since you were a child, he asked strangely. Muji seemed to calm down again. She narrowed her eyes, a half smile appeared on her face, and she looked at Musian, don't worry, I didn't do anything too bad to you. Your spiritual energy was not as strong as it is now, and I just tried it a little bit. This sounded inexplicably ambiguous, but Musian felt that the other party was just teasing him. Oh right, Muji suddenly smiled as if she remembered something, you should call me sister, right? Sister. Musian looked down at the little girl with her hands behind her back, his tone full of subtlety, you want me to call you sister? Muji puffed up her proud little chest, as if observing some strange creature, what's wrong? Is it so difficult for you to call me sister? Musian shrugged, to be honest, it's a bit strange for me to call a girl who looks younger than me in every way sister. He paused and continued, and, I still can't believe what you said. He stared into Muji's eyes and said, what does the Muwanji you mentioned look like? Muji stepped on the small she put on her deerskin boots and circled around Musian, saying, she is a very powerful woman. It can be said that everything I have now was given to me by her. As for what she looks like, I don't remember it very well now. When Muji said this, a hint of darkness flashed across her eyes, and her tone was a little lower. Tens of thousands of years ago, she adopted me as her adopted daughter, and then gave me the vacant position of the Forbidden Land of Life. She also gave me my name. Musian's eyes moved slightly, so, you are not the first generation owner of the Forbidden Land of Life. It is rumored that the Forbidden Land of Life is the earliest of the 9 forbidden places, and the Lord of Life is the one with the longest lifespan. Is this rumor false? Musian asked. Among the 9 forbidden places, 3 of them have changed their owners. Muji said lightly, when my mother took me to the forbidden land of life, there was no one in this forbidden land. When Muji said this, she sat in Muzian's arms again, as if she was feeling the warm breath of the boy. While swinging her feet, she slowly told a secret that was unknown to the public. When the chaos first began, the rules of the 9 forbidden places covered the entire Juzhu. They were like gods who were high above and could arbitrarily deprive the essence of living beings for their own use. At that time, Juzhu did not have the rules of heaven and earth, only the rules of taboos. Any cultivator who stepped into the return to void realm would have his essence harvested by the forbidden land. It can be said that it was a real dark age, and there was almost no hope of any cultivation. But not long after that, a woman appeared. She was sometimes conscious and sometimes unconscious, and her consciousness often fell into chaos. The Lord of Life at that time took a fancy to her powerful essence, so he attacked her. It was the Lord of Life who woke her up. In that fight, the Lord of Life's consciousness was almost wiped out, and the taboo rules that were usually omnipotent seemed to be ineffective on the woman. Not long after that, the woman turned her hand to suppress the 9 forbidden places, and beat the 9 gods who were supposed to control the 9 provinces into a state of temper. They chose to restrain the taboo rules and actively hibernate, waiting to be born again after the woman's lifespan ended. 20,000 years later, the Supreme in the Forbidden Land took action and planned to cover the 9 provinces with the taboo rules again. Because there was no emperor medicine at that time, it was already very good for the Hedeo realm to live for 20,000 years. However, when he took action, he found that the empress who was as beautiful as a nightmare was still alive. After waking up, she slapped the Supreme back to the Forbidden Land. After that, every 20,000 years, a Supreme Being could not help but test. However, every time without exception, the Empress always lived in the world. Since then, the Forbidden Land has simply secluded itself and no longer appeared in the world, hoping to survive until the mysterious Empress's life ended. It was also from that time that Juzhu gradually evolved and was divided into Dongzhou Demon Realm and other places. Various powerful people such as human cultivators, demon cultivators, and the evil gods of the southern wilderness appeared frequently, which made the Forbidden Land more fearful and depressed. They should have dominated all living things in Juzhu and controlled everything, but the appearance of a woman changed everything. It would be fine if it was just like that, but the woman was not interested in anything in Juzhu at all, as if she would take action just because she had nothing to do. If I remember correctly, the supreme strength of the Forbidden Land should be beyond the unity of the Tao, right? Muzian suddenly asked. Muji nodded gently. The strength of each supreme being is beyond the state of harmony. Although not as good as the state of immortality, with the blessing of the taboo rules, the combat power is extraordinary. So at that time, some supreme beings suspected that the woman was already above the state of immortality. During her time in the world, the road to immortality appeared more than once. At first, some people thought that she would leave after the road to immortality appeared, but unexpectedly, she still stayed in Juzhu and never left. In fact, if she wanted, she could have become the only master of Juzhu at that time, but she didn't do it either, Muji said. A female emperor who transcends the mundane world, whose strength can suppress the 9 supreme beings who transcend the state of harmony, but her purpose is not to replace the 9 supreme beings, nor to become an immortal. Similarly, she has no interest in the power of faith of all living things. She doesn't want to become the god of Juzhu, and she has no interest in becoming an immortal, so what does she want to do? This matter is still something that the supreme beings cannot understand. Muji said with a smile, of course, I also learned these things from the original slaves of the Forbidden Land of Life. As for the details, I don't know. Muzian thought for a while and suddenly asked, you said that Muwanji brought you to the Forbidden Land of Life tens of thousands of years ago, but I am not yet 20 years old this year. Doesn't the age match? Are you not very smart? Muji glanced at him, before she adopted me, you were already in the forbidden land of life, but I rarely saw you at that time. Mother said that your situation is special, so you need to be sealed in the formation all the time. I was already in the forbidden land of life before I adopted you. Musian murmured, and suddenly thought of something and called. He looked at the little girl for a few times. So no matter what, you can't be my sister, right? After all, I came here first, you should be the younger sister. Muji rolled his eyes, sat on his lap, and gently stroked Musian's face with his little hand. His voice was crisp and sweet. Your mental age is less than 20 years old, so of course I am the older sister. Musian didn't care, and murmured to himself, I was sealed in the formation for tens of thousands of years when I was a child, and I was not released until this life. After that, Mu Wanji took me to Tianqian City? Or did she use some Taoist magic to allow me to be born into the world like an ordinary human? Musian looked at the black booklet in Muji's hand. Life taboo. As long as a person's name is known, the contents written in this booklet will come true. The stronger the user, the stronger the taboo. So the other party may have used the life taboo, arranged everything, and turned Musian into a playboy in Tianqian City. If that's the case, then he would meet Sister Mengro at that time. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Musian stopped talking. He had received too much information today, and he needed to calm down by himself. It seems that it's unlikely that I can ask my big brother to play with me in a short time. Seeing Musian's thoughtful look, Muji couldn't help but reveal a light and bright smile, and looked up at the faintly vibrating void in front of her. Her eyes rarely showed a trace of emotionless indifference. When did the servants of other forbidden places have the courage to peek at my conversation with my big brother? Even if it was just a clone, Muji's temperament changed at this moment. She stood up and walked down the hall gracefully, walking through the vibrating void like a butterfly, and her little hand gently stroked the void. Every time her slender and delicate palm touched a place, there was a scream. This scene was totally different from the image of the docile and cute little Lolita. After Musian came back to his senses and took a look, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The casual chat with Muji just now almost made him forget that this girl was the owner of the forbidden land of life. Even if she was just a clone now, she was definitely not something that ordinary people could provoke. Muji blinked and looked at Musian, saying, although this is not a forbidden place, the enemies have been dealt with. You can meditate for a while. I will come to chat with you later, and try the taste of the natural furnace by the way. If it was Musian at ordinary times, he would have probably realized that there was another meaning in Muji's words, but he was still thinking about the pile of tedious information just now. It was not until Muji's petite figure disappeared in the hall that Musian came back to his senses from his previous thoughts. He gently hooked his finger towards the shadow in front of him. A figure suddenly appeared in front of him. When he looked closely, Wei Mengru was already sitting beside his throne, looking down at him. Musian admired the plump and tight white legs under the skirt of the maid, while reaching out to hold her soft little hand and pulling her into his arms. Seeing that Wei Mengru did not resist, Musian could not help but say with some surprise, "It's rare. Sister Mengru is so proactive today." Wei Mengru sat next to the young master and said in a calm tone, "You are not very emotional now, so I just give you a little comfort." "Musian, did you hear the conversation just now?" Wei Mengru said softly. Musian was silent for a moment, staring at her cold and beautiful profile, and suddenly asked, "Sister Mengru, do you still remember what Mu Wanji looks like?" So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 567. I remember you said that you agreed to protect me because of my mother. Have you forgotten what she looks like? Seeing Wei Mengru didn't say anything, Musian asked again. This was the suspicion that Musian had when he talked with Muji before. Wei Mengru had never mentioned anything about Mu Wanji in front of him. At the beginning, she just said that she was entrusted by his mother, so she decided to stay by his side to protect him. Could it be that Wei Mengru didn't want to mention Mu Wanj, but subconsciously ignored this person? Because someone blocked the secrets of heaven, he would subconsciously ignore or even forget this person. This is a terrible guess, but Musian just thinks it is not impossible. After all, he had encountered similar experiences before about blocking the secrets of heaven. Wei Mengru glanced at her young master's somewhat dishonest hands and shook her head gently. I vaguely remember that it was the lady who entrusted me to protect you, and it was also she who told me that you can suppress bad luck. As for Mu Wanj's appearance, I don't remember it. Wei Mengru gently covered her forehead and closed her eyes slightly, as if reminiscing, and whispered, I only remember that she was a very beautiful beauty. I have never seen such a beautiful person. A very beautiful woman, but you just can't remember what she looks like, Musian asked softly. Wei Mengru nodded silently. Seeing the young master frowning in thought, she seemed to understand what the other party was thinking, and said again faintly, from what Mu Ji said, Mu Wanj seems to have just blocked her own secrets. You don't have to worry too much about her safety. Maybe, she is still watching you secretly somewhere now. Being able to help Mu Ji become the master of the forbidden land of life, this alone is not something that ordinary people can do. Rather than believing that something happened to Mu Wanji, it is more credible that Mu Wanji deliberately concealed her identity and blocked the secret. Musian nodded, said nothing, but just pondered secretly. He sorted out what Mu Ji said to him today. About tens of thousands of years ago, Mu Wanji adopted a little girl and named her Mu Ji, and then helped her become the owner of the forbidden land of life. And at that time, Mu Ji had a close relationship with him, and even warmed his meridians when he was young. It is not certain whether this is true, but at least the logic of the whole thing is feasible, and there are no loopholes. And after that, Mu Wanji sealed him in the formation for some reason, leaving him to be reborn in this life tens of thousands of years later. This is the information Musian got from summarizing Mu Ji's words. No. There are still some loopholes in this that don't make sense. Musian suddenly whispered to himself. If he has been sealed in the formation for tens of thousands of years, then where did his wife in his previous life come from? It's impossible that they met in a dream, right? Instead of imagining it here, why not find an opportunity to seduce Tiandao Will with a beauty trick? As long as you can make Miss Tiandao obsessed, she will tell you everything you want to know in order to please you. Maybe she will tell you while tasting the spiritual energy of the natural furnace. At this moment, a sweet, crisp and pleasant voice suddenly came from the bottom of Musian's heart. Yuan Luo. This Tiandao Loli didn't know when she started eavesdropping. When Musian heard her voice, he was surprised for a moment and immediately asked in his heart, how do you know that the will of the heavenly Dao knows these things? The heavenly Dao knows everything, so the will of the heavenly Dao also knows most of the things in this world. Yuan Luo said, but each will of the heavenly Dao controls different things. For example, the will of the heavenly Dao that you attacked in the Dongzhou restricted area before, she controls the heavenly tribulation of the cultivators, and the will of the second number that intends to suppress you in the forbidden ancient road controls the 9 forbidden ancient roads. As long as you can find the will of the heavenly Dao that knows the past, the problem will naturally be solved. Musian heard this, but he sighed lightly and transmitted his voice, even if I find it, I may not be able to charm the other party like last time. Last time, he took Miss Tiandao by surprise and directly sneak attacked. Like when the second number faced Musian later, he didn't give him a chance to get close. Because she realized that if she touched Musian's aura, she might never be able to go back. This was the conclusion drawn by Miss Tiandao number 1 after fully experiencing the aura of the heavenly court. Yuan Luo, whether you can charm the other party is something you should figure out yourself. She paused and continued, if you want to find other Tiandao wills, actually, I don't think you need to find them yourself. For some reason, Although he didn't see Yuan Luo, Musian felt that she had appeared in front of him invisibly. The little girl gently held his face and said in a charming and sweet voice, "Each Tiandao will has information that can be communicated with each other. In other words, what one Tiandao will has experienced can be sensed by other Tiandao wills. As long as you can make them unable to help but clamp their thighs." Musian's eyes changed, and he said in a strange tone, "Do you want the Tiandao wills to come to me on their own?" Seeing Yuan Luo's expression of "You are quite smart?" look surprised, and Musian complained viciously, "If I am struck to death by the calamity sent down by the will of heaven one day, I will not let you go even if I become a ghost. If you die, I will be gone too. We are in the same boat, so I will not harm you." Yuan Luo's figure appeared in front of him like an illusion. She climbed into Musian's arms, then leaned close to his ear and shouted crisply, word by word, "Big brother." Musian raised his head suddenly and stared at the seemingly unreal girl. "You have seen Mu Ji before, right? This is not difficult to guess. After all, everything Yuan Luo has is determined by the fish in Musian's fish pond." But Musian has never seen Mu Ji before, but Yuan Luo still copied Mu Ji's abilities and personality. "Don't stare at me so fiercely, I'm doing this for your own good. If you're really angry, I'll make it up to you next time," Yuan Luo said in a charming tone. "For example, next time you go to the heavenly palace, I'll agree to any compensation you want. In fact, I also want to taste the spiritual energy of the natural furnace." At the end, she licked her lips gently and looked at Musian with an innocent look. "Didn't you do this to Ling long before?" This fairy, not allowed to be touched but likes to tease, Musian waved his hand gently, indicating that Yuan Luo could leave first. This Yuan Luo didn't intend to let anyone touch her at all, and Musian knew this very well, so he was too lazy to waste time chatting with her. But Yuan Luo did remind him of one thing. Before, Musian had been thinking about how to help Miss Tiandao No. 1 devour other Tiandao wills and make her the only Tiandao spokesperson in Jizhu, but he was struggling to find a suitable method. But Yuan Luo was right. As long as something exciting enough is done, even if other heavenly Dao wills want to pretend not to see it, it probably won't work, right? If the will of number 1 can continuously transmit information such as "very good, his aura is really wonderful, I want more heavenly palace aura" to other heavenly Dao wills, and number 1 shares senses, who can resist this? In short, if you want to know what happened in Jizhu in the past, you can only start from the heavenly Dao will. When Musian came back to his senses, he found that the cold and beautiful maid in his arms was looking at the young master with a strange look and said, "Who were you talking to just now?" Although he couldn't hear the voice transmission between Musian and Yuan Luo, Wei Mengru had such a feeling from the brief silence that Musian just fell into. Sister Mengru is really sharp. Musian sighed in his heart, feeling the warmth of the cold and beautiful maid in his arms, and smiled. "You should have guessed it, right?" Wei Mengru showed an unexpected look and said to herself, "The new way of heaven in heaven." She knew everything about the young master, so naturally she knew a little about Yuan Luo's affairs. Musian asked, "What's the situation in the restricted area now?" Wei Mengru snorted coldly. "Someone sneaked out of the restricted area without saying hello, and left without even attending the coronation ceremony of his beloved sister Lingxian. What do you think she will do after she finds out?" Musian sighed lightly. The situation was special at the time, and the taboo rule set by Lingxian happened to target me. Wouldn't it be a waste if I didn't use it? At least this fishing was very successful. There are already 3 taboo places that have appeared today, right? Wei Mengru glanced at the young master. "You should explain this to your sister Lingxian later, I think she should be very angry now." After all, Ye Lingxian knew that Musian could block the rules of heaven and earth. If he wanted, it would be impossible for him to be teleported out of the restricted area in a short time. After a slight pause, Wei Mengru said quietly, the taboo rules of the Dongzhou restricted area are now completely controlled by Ye Lingxian. She is invincible in the restricted area. If you are locked up by her, even if I want to save you, I am afraid I will be powerless. Muzian couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. Lingxian won't do anything too outrageous, you worry too much. You have been with her for so long, don't you understand her character? Wei Mengru raised her chin and said lightly, a woman's character is not something you think you can understand. When do you plan to return to the restricted area? Muzian pondered for a moment and said, let's talk about it tomorrow. I have something to ask Muji. As for the background and power distribution of the major forbidden places, there should be no one in the world who knows more about it than Muji. As for Sister Lingxian, I think Ruoxi will explain it to her clearly, Muzian said. Sister Lingxian is reasonable. As long as Naxi explains to her that her brother Mu left the restricted area to do business, I think she will understand. Wei Mengru said softly and didn't ask any more questions. A qualified maid would never ask about the private life of her master. All she needs to do is to do what the master ordered and then quietly guard him. Anyway, whether it is Ye Lingxian, Bai Ruoxi or even Qingdi, at most they are his Taoist partners. But there is only one maid he trusts. If one day she changes her mind and wants to lock the young master in a small dark room and set a trap for him, I'm afraid he will jump in without noticing. Wei Mengru's cold mouth corners slightly raised a faint arc, but soon pursed her lips and said lightly, I can't stay here for too long, otherwise there will be a risk of being discovered. You should meditate by yourself for a while. Although this is not a forbidden land of life, and Muji is just a ray of spiritual consciousness, the Lord of Life is the Lord of Life. Before ensuring that she does not have any malicious intentions, Wei Mengru will try her best to ensure that her existence is not noticed by the other party. Although he still wanted to be intimate with the maid for a while, the location here was special, and Muzian did not let his lower body dominate him after all. He walked out of the main hall to relax and unknowingly came to a small bamboo building made of green bamboo. Outside the bamboo building was a bamboo forest. Many special spiritual minerals were stored here, which gave off a charming orange-yellow glow at night. Muzian looked around and couldn't help but sigh, Muji's taste is really good. I didn't expect the environment here to be so beautiful. It's a pity that there are no entertainment activities in this era. Sooner or later, the beautiful environment will make you tired of it. I don't know how Muji spent tens of thousands of years alone in the forbidden land of life. It's beautiful, isn't it? At this time, a clear, sweet voice suddenly came from beside him. Muji suddenly jumped lightly and came to Muzian's side, as if she had disappeared. There was a touch of innocence in the smile, but there was a different kind of charm in the beautiful eyes looking at Muzian. It's very beautiful. Muzian looked at Muji and said. The girl's skin is slightly sickly pale, her delicate shoulders seem to be crushed with a gentle touch, and her slender and frail figure is outlined in a complicated silver-patterned dress. She looked up at the bamboo forest and said quietly, this place used to belong to a certain family in Dongzhou, but then the family split up and fought with the main family, and many people died. After that, other clan members moved elsewhere. Later, my slaves discovered this place and used it as one of Dongzhou's bases. After glancing at Muzian, the girl continued in a very innocent tone, the bamboo forest should be full of their bones now. Muzian glanced at the bamboo forest and suddenly felt that this place was not so beautiful. When Muji saw this, she couldn't help but smiled and took Muzian's hand, making him squat down. Then she leaned into his ear and whispered, just kidding, no matter what, I won't leave a pile of corpses in the bamboo forest. This girl did it on purpose. Muzian felt a little speechless, and it was obvious that Muji was just teasing him. Do you have something to say here? Muzian asked. Muji pursed her lips, a charming smile appeared on her pure and pretty face, and said in a tired voice, if you have to say it, it is indeed a very important thing. Why didn't you say something important just now? Why do you have to say it now? He tilted his head slightly, and when he saw Muji's beautiful and lovely face, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised in his eyes. What on earth does this girl want to do? For some reason, Muzian always felt that the temperament of the girl in front of him suddenly changed. Her pure and beautiful eyes were now full of spring waves, her small red lips were lightly opened, and the faint fragrance penetrated her nose, revealing an intoxicating scent. The fragrance. She didn't have any charm skills. She just looked at Muzian closely like this. However, in Muzian's eyes, she seemed to be filled with infinite charm, making people want to get closer to her face, just a little bit. Good. But she was still not completely sure whether what Muji said today was true or not. Muzian was naturally a little wary of her. He maintained his composure, took half a step back, and said with a smile, "If you have anything important to say, you might as well just say it." He paused and continued, "I have used up a lot of mental energy today, and I need to go back and continue meditating later." Muji clasped her hands behind her back and raised her head slightly to look at him. "What is the important matter that requires me to come to you in the middle of the night? Why don't you guess now?" The next moment, her figure quietly transformed into her grown-up form. She took half a step closer in her moccasin boots, then stood on tiptoes and whispered in his ear with a clear and sweet voice. "If you guess it correctly, there will be a reward." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 568. Lingxian was in a delicate mood now, and her usually bright eyes seemed a little dim. Logically speaking, as the only taboo supreme who completely controlled the taboo rules and was no longer bound by heaven and earth, she could be said to be a winner in life. However, the girl was not happy at all at this moment. She was even a little upset. "I actually set the rules myself to send Brother Mu out to other women." Lingxian murmured to herself, raised her head, and her eyes swept across Bai Ruoxi's extremely mean breasts, and stayed on the delicate face of this palace skirt beauty, and said faintly, "Sister Ruoxi means that Brother Mu has left with the supreme of the forbidden land of life. Mu Lang has his own plans, and he seems to know the owner of the forbidden land of life." Bai Ruoxi said softly, "Sister Lingxian, don't worry too much, Mu Lang will not encounter any danger." Lingxian certainly knew that Muzian would not encounter any danger. Muji, who was just a wisp of spiritual consciousness, could not pose any threat to Muzian. And with Wei Mengru following him, Muji should not have taken him out of Dongzhou. But, according to the original script, after driving away King Di, Gong Lianyu and the Queen of the Demon Realm, she should have enjoyed the fruits of victory. After all, the rules of the restricted area are now completely controlled by her, and Brother Mu was also in the restricted area at that time. It can be said that with the right time, right place, and right people, Lingxian forcibly sent people out of the restricted area. Sister Lingxian doesn't have to be so sad. Mu Lang must have something important to do before leaving the restricted area, otherwise he wouldn't have left with Mu Ji at that time, right? Bai Ruoxi said softly, "At least the Queen of the Demon Realm was not with Mu Lang at the time, so you don't have to worry about her taking Mu Lang to the Demon Realm to get married or something." Lingxuan's face looked a little better after hearing this. It's not wrong to say that as long as the Queen of the Demon Realm doesn't get close to Brother Mu, everything will be fine. After all, only that woman is thinking about marrying him now, and the rice is cooked. Sister Ruoxi, don't you blame me for using the rules to drive you out of the restricted area, Lingxian suddenly asked softly. She didn't expect Bai Ruoxi to come and tell her what happened to Muzian outside the restricted area during the coronation ceremony. You just like him, there's nothing wrong with that. Besides, you're targeting the palace master instead of me, right? Bai Ruoxi's eyes were filled with tenderness, and he couldn't help but reach out and gently hug the back of the girl's head, and then gently pressed her and held her in his arms. When the girl's pretty face touched the soft touch, Ye Lingxuan's mentality changed a little. I think this is why Brother Mu is obsessed with Bairuoxi, this soft and full chest. I'm afraid she can't reach it even after she grows up. But why is it so reassuring in her arms when it's obviously a disgusting chest? Ye Lingxian closed her eyes slightly, as if she was immersed in the warm embrace of Ni 11. There seemed to be a faint milky fragrance that permeated her nose, which made her swallow her saliva subconsciously. At this moment, a figure quietly descended not far away, and also pulled Ye Lingxian back to reality from her previous trance. She hurriedly left Bairuoxi's arms, then turned her head to look at the Reincarnation Queen and said, "Where did you go just now?" The Reincarnation Queen said calmly and indifferently, "I noticed that Musian disappeared in the restricted area, so I went out to investigate." Ye Lingxian couldn't help but blink her beautiful eyes when she heard it, with a hint of doubt in her eyes. "It's rare, I can still see you care so much about Brother Mu." Obviously, the Reincarnation Queen didn't care about anyone else except her before. The Reincarnation Queen walked to the side of the purple-skirted girl and said, "Musian is the one the Master loves, so in a sense he is also related to me, so I took the initiative to go out and confirm his safety." Ye Lingxian didn't think much about it and nodded. "Sister Ruoxi has just told me that Brother Mu has something to deal with, so he had to leave with Muji, but there will be no danger, so don't worry." When she said this, the girl couldn't help but sigh. That being said, what is Brother Mu doing with the owner of the Forbidden Land of Life? It always makes people feel a little uneasy. The Reincarnation Queen suddenly said, "Doesn't the Master have the Desolate Time Lock? When you really want to see him, just use the Desolate Time Lock." Ye Lingxian was stunned for a moment, and her originally dark pupils gradually regained their brightness. Yes, she has the Desolate Time Lock, the ancestral artifact. No matter where Brother Mu is, the Desolate Time Lock can instantly lock him and even bring him back to her side. In this case, what is she in a hurry now? After Brother Mu has finished his business, why not bring him back with the chain of desolate time? Thinking of this, Ye Lingxuan's frown gradually relaxed. The reincarnated queen looked at her master, who seemed to have figured it out, and a faint smile also appeared on her face. At this moment, she suddenly felt that Bairuoxi, who was not far away, was looking at her, and couldn't help asking, "Miss Bai, what's the matter?" Bairuoxi had a faint smile on her cold and weak face, and said softly, "Nothing, I just always feel that you seem to care about Mu Lang." The Sanhui royal sister replied calmly and indifferently, "Because Musian is a person cherished by the master, so I will naturally care about him." Now the memories of the ninth life are sealed in the body of the reincarnated queen, and the more memories Ye Lingxian inherits, the more memories the reincarnated queen will get. This also means that as much as Ye Lingxian likes her brother Mu, she will also like her. But can dolls really like someone like ordinary people? Looking at Bairuoxi, who seemed not to be suspicious, a trace of confusion flashed in the eyes of the reincarnated queen. To be fair, a girl comes looking for someone of the opposite sex at night. As long as you have a smarter mind, it's not difficult to guess the other person's purpose. After all, it's impossible for the other party to spend the night just to play chess with him or something, right? Musian, who has rich experience, naturally vaguely guessed Muji's purpose. But he still felt a little unreal. After all, not long ago, the taboo lord who controlled the forbidden land of life threatened to make him a slave under her feet and surrender to her after catching him. However, now that her identity has changed in the blink of an eye, Muji suddenly changed from the cold and ruthless person in the world of life. The lord became someone closely related to him. At this time, a faint laughter sounded in the silent bamboo forest, which also brought Musian back to reality from his thoughts just now. A seductive smile appeared on Muji's lips. "By the way, there will be a reward for guessing correctly, but if you guess wrong, there will be a punishment, right? Seeing that Musian didn't say anything for a long time, Muji urged again, how about it, have you thought about what I want to do with you tonight? I'll give you half a stick of incense at the end. Musian glanced at her sideways, his eyes full of suspicion. Why do I feel like I am the one who guesses right or wrong? Please, a real beauty comes to have a tryst with you at night. No matter whether you guess right or wrong in the end, you will be punished or rewarded, no matter what, it won't be a loss, right? Muji also glanced at Musian sideways, but her pure dark eyes looked so charming at this moment, and her voice was a little casual. My mother once said before that men are bastards. You take the initiative, he doesn't know how to cherish when you are close to him, but if you stay away from him, it will arouse his desire. Are you also such a bad boy? How does that woman understand a man so well? Musian's expression froze. What did Muwanj teach you? Isn't that what it is? Muji took half a step closer to Musian, her lips were close to his face. At this moment, Musian seemed to be able to vaguely feel the thrilling soft touch. With a teasing look in her eyes, she smiled and said, do you like this tone? If you like it, I can't consider giving you a little punishment later, right? The breath so close at hand seemed so ambiguous. Actually, before I knew that the Tian Tian cauldron was you, I originally planned to use the taboo of life to rewrite your actions so that you could always surrender to me, but now that I know it is you, I will forcefully twist you. His will is not very good. Muji said to herself, although I always feel that you seem to like to be dominated by others, if you are willing, how about we try it now? As she spoke, she took out a piece of black letter paper from somewhere. Musian silently stretched out his hand to hold Muji's wrist. Can you stop guessing other people's thoughts all the time? I don't have so many weird thoughts. How do you know so much in the forbidden land of life all the time? How to play? Muji smiled sweetly. I heard my mother mention it occasionally before. But she didn't stay with me for long, so I actually know a little bit about it. For example, some men are foot controllers, some are leg controllers, and some are sister controllers. Speaking of which, I remember that you secretly looked at my feet before, right? In fact, if you like it, I can let you serve me for a while, hee hee. Musian couldn't help but cover his face and couldn't bear to look directly at him, so I told you not to always speculate on other people's thoughts. My hobbies are still very normal. This girl obviously can't read minds, so why does she know him so well? Are you really not going to consider the proposal I just made? No one else will bother you here. Even if you secretly do something to me, no one will know. Muji seemed to have seen Musian's true thoughts and teased him seductively. Her fingertips had even pinched the taboo. It should be said that he was truly experienced. Musian almost forced himself to calm down and said in a calm tone, I will go back if you don't make your purpose clear. Before being convinced of the authenticity of what Muji said to him today, this ancient supreme cannot be completely trusted. It's so boring. Muji bit her lower lip lightly, and then a faint smile quickly appeared on her face. Didn't I tell you that I wanted to try your natural furnace cauldron spiritual energy today? She gently stroked Musian's chest and said softly, don't you still know why I came to you? The aroma is astounding and the soft whisper lingers in the ears, giving you an intoxicating charm. Musian couldn't help but tilt his head slightly, staring at Muji's cute face, and couldn't help but feel a little weird. When he was walking alone in the bamboo forest before, he was still lamenting that there were no entertainment facilities in this world, and at night, there seemed to be nothing to do except meditating. However, now it seems that although there are no entertainment facilities, if he wants, there seem to be quite a lot of entertainment activities at night. Seeing that Musian had stopped talking, Muji's mouth curled up a faint smile. Her peach blossom eyes were moist and charming, staring at Musian, her sexy red lips slightly opened, and she said, do you want to play the prisoner game with your sister now? Before she finished speaking, The teasing look on Muji's face suddenly subsided a little, and there was a hint of coldness in her beautiful eyes, and she glanced inadvertently outside the bamboo forest. Seeing her suddenly subsiding her seductive look, Muzian felt relieved and a little regretful, and asked, "What's wrong?" "Someone came in." Muji closed her eyes slightly, and after scanning with her spiritual consciousness for a while, she quietly opened her eyes and looked at Muzian with a slightly teasing smile. "It looks like he's here to rescue you." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 569. Someone knew he was here, and came to save him? When Muzian heard this, he immediately had doubts. Logically, Yao Meng and Ruoxi knew his plan, and Zixuan had just returned to the demon world not long ago. It couldn't be that she changed her mind and came to find him again, right? Since it wasn't them, the person who saved him should be someone who didn't know his plan. "Do you know who came in from outside?" Muzian asked. Muji said quietly, "The Princess of Yunzhou." "Princess? How did she know I was here?" Muzian was stunned at first, but then he quickly reacted. The princess was born connected to the avenue, and he had just been close to the princess not long ago, and he also transmitted a lot of natural spiritual energy to the avenue. The princess probably used the remaining natural spiritual energy in her body to lock him. Just thinking about this, Muzian suddenly found that the body of the royal sister next to him was gradually shrinking, until it finally turned into the posture of a little girl who looked innocent. She held Muzian's hand, smiled faintly and said, "Instead of thinking about it here, why not go out and see now? Anyway, the night between us is still very long." Muji knew that the young man beside her had indeed been fascinated by her just now. If no one had disturbed this beautiful atmosphere, she should have been enjoying the spiritual energy of the natural furnace to her heart's content. Using various ways to welcome the spiritual energy of the natural furnace. But thanks to the Daipen Emperor and the Princess of Yunzhou, she calmed down a little. Although she wanted to get Muzian, she was only a clone now. Even if she really felt the spiritual energy of the natural furnace, it would only be a clone. Her original body could only be lonely in the depths of the forbidden land of life. So, she should go back with Muzian, back to the forbidden land of life that he had sealed for tens of thousands of years. When Muji thought of this, she reached out and gently tugged at the corner of Muzian's clothes, and said crisply, "After meeting the princess, how about we go back to the forbidden land of life together? You should also want to see the place where you once slept. Maybe it can awaken your memory." The girl's tone was a bit persuasive, like a little devil whispering in her ear. Muzian glanced at Muji silently. The owner of the forbidden land of life was looking at him eagerly with clear eyes, looking like a little girl who was ignorant of the world. However, Muzian could not see any emotional fluctuations in those beautiful eyes, as if staring into the abyss. Only at this time, Muzian could fully realize that this was not a simple and cute little girl, but the supreme of the forbidden land. Muzian calmly withdrew his gaze, and soon there was a bit of helplessness in his eyes. He sighed and said, "Although I also want to go back to the forbidden land of life, but isn't there a rumor in Juzhu that if you step into the forbidden land of life, you will never be able to come out again?" Muji tilted her head in confusion and looked at him. "Why do you want to come out again?" "I can modify the rules of the forbidden land of life and give you the best training environment. You can practice to the Hedeo realm in the forbidden land of life. If you are willing, the immortal medicine in the forbidden land of life will also be yours. You can even use the immortal medicine to ascend to heaven. Such a reward is more generous than any forbidden place that Muzian knows now." It must be said that even Muzian is a little tempted. In fact, he has believed most of what Muji said today. Maybe Muji is really the girl adopted by Mu Wanj tens of thousands of years ago. But even so, it is impossible for him to really follow Muji into the forbidden land of life. Tens of thousands of years are enough to change a person. Even if Muji had really had a relationship with him, her personality was unpredictable now. Once she entered the forbidden land of life, she would really give the power of life and death to Muji. Seeing that Muzian had not spoken for a long time, Muji seemed to understand something and smiled slightly. I know you don't trust me completely yet, and you don't have to give me an answer so quickly. But just remember, whether it is the forbidden land of life or even the elixir in the forbidden land of life, as long as you are willing, it will be yours. What a generous condition. Muzian felt a little emotional. He suppressed his inner restlessness, but his eyes showed sadness. In your heart, am I approaching you this time just for the elixir or something? Muji was stunned for a moment, and then a touch of charm that should not belong to a girl appeared in her eyes, and she laughed and said, I know you were caught by me on purpose this time, and you approached me to understand your life experience. At first, Muji didn't react to Muzian's purpose, but after knowing the relationship between Muzian and her, she naturally reacted. Muji suddenly said casually, I just told you a lot of things, but there is one thing I didn't want to tell you so early. Muzian subconsciously looked at Muji, only to hear her speak in a casual tone, Big brother, have you ever thought about why my mother adopted me at that time? Why did she let me become the owner of the forbidden land of life? Is it just for my sake? Muzian was stunned. Staring into Muzian's eyes, Muji smiled and said, I didn't lie to you just now. As long as you are willing, everything in the forbidden land of life will belong to you. She quickly shook her head, no, not just the forbidden land of life. She gestured with her hand, asking Muzian to half squat down. Then, she put her lips to the boy's ear and whispered, even I am yours. Muzian looked up at Muji in astonishment, only to find that this extremely mysterious girl had already left him and walked out of the bamboo forest, gradually going farther and farther away. Until he followed Muji out of the bamboo forest, Muzian's mind was still echoing with what she had said before. If we judge by what Muji just said, his mother adopted Muji and even gave the forbidden land of life to Muji, in fact, to pave the way for him. If so, then Muji's words just now, I am also yours, are intriguing. Muji, the supreme of the forbidden land of life. Maybe, it's his fiancée. Muzian shook his head gently, trying to dispel these messy thoughts. Among the 9 forbidden places, the supreme of the forbidden land of life is definitely the most beautiful one. Few women can match her in terms of appearance, strength, and even background. If the will of heaven confirms that what Muji said today is true, then what should he do? What if Muji tells him later that Muwanj arranged a marriage for him when she was a child, then what should he do? Could it be that they really got married? It's impossible for him to take the initiative to propose to cancel the engagement later, right? If he really does this, he will probably add an extremely terrifying enemy to himself for no reason. A supreme who can use the forbidden things of life to threaten him at any time, as long as she is in the forbidden land of life, even the Yuhua realm can't do anything to her. There is no need to be an enemy with such a difficult existence. Therefore, there are only 2 paths in front of Muzian. Either be a wife or an enemy. In fact, I really just want to be a loyal good man, Muzian sighed in his heart and unknowingly came to the outside of the bamboo forest. He quickly gathered his thoughts and said in a voice transmission, Muji, can I have a private chat with the princess? Why do you have so many lovers? I remember that the princess of the Great Dao is the fiancée of the Great Peng Emperor. She is actually involved with you. Muji glanced at the young man behind him with a little surprise, with a faint smile in her beautiful eyes, and continued. Also, you should call me sister when you ask for help from others. Stop it, I have something important to do. Muzian frowned. The girl, who was always used to being strong, was slightly displeased when she saw this. Are you ordering me? What else? Muzian frowned. Don't force me to kneel down and beg you. Muji was startled, and then she covered her mouth and laughed goose goose goose. She waved her little hand and did not speak to stop him. Soon after saying goodbye to Muji, Musian walked out of the bamboo forest silently all the way and came to a mountain forest outside the palace. The mountain forest is unique and elegant, but what is more attractive is the woman who appeared in the field of vision at this moment. She wore a silver white gauze skirt, revealing her proud white neck and delicate collarbone. Her clothes were a little thin, highlighting her tall and straight chest. Her beautiful eyes were shining. Although her face could not be seen because of the veil, her charming temperament could attract men's eyes involuntarily, like a plump peony waiting to be picked by others. The queen of the demon realm was born with a charming bone, while the woman in front of her was a reserved wife. "Your Highness, why are you here?" Musian asked in a surprised tone. "If I want, I can capture your breath no matter where you are." The princess smiled gently, but her eyes glanced at the depths of the hall inadvertently, and said calmly, "I thought something would happen to you after you were sent out of the restricted area by the queen of the restricted area, but it seems that you and the owner of the restricted area of life seem to get along well. It seems that I don't need to save you." If something really happened, Musian would not come out to see her so leisurely now. Musian shook his head and said, "Anyway, thank you for traveling thousands of miles to chase me here. Does the great Pen Emperor know about this? If he knew, do you think I would still come here to see you?" The princess glanced at the young man charmingly, and her red lips under the veil slightly opened, saying, "At present, all the major forbidden places seem to be ready to move. He is worried about Yunzhou and has gone back first." As she spoke, the princess seemed to think of something and reminded again, "Although I don't know what Muji said to you, she is the supreme of the forbidden land of life after all, and some words cannot be fully believed." Musian was about to speak, but at this moment, an abrupt voice suddenly sounded in the silent forest, "I thought you came to find your big brother because you care about him. After all this trouble, it turns out that you are here to alienate the relationship between me and him." When the voice fell, not far behind Musian, there seemed to be a surge of vitality in the invisible, and the supreme of the forbidden land of life appeared behind him at some point, and she looked at the princess with a smile. Although she looked petite, she exuded an inexplicable dangerous aura when she appeared. Muji had not left since Musian and the princess were talking. She was worried about the princess being alone with Musian. Although Musian still did not trust her, in Muji's eyes, Musian was already a person in the forbidden land of life. Muji naturally couldn't sit idly by when her own people were harassed by the women of Yunzhou, and the other party even tried to sow discord between them. "Since you are the wife of the great Pen Emperor, don't think about my people." Muji had a gentle smile on her face, "Since I am in a good mood today, I can ignore your mistakes this time." The princess pondered over Muji's words just now, "Your people." Her tone was gentle, but she was not polite. "In the 9 forbidden places, I am afraid that at least 4 supreme beings think that Musian is their people. But even if you take him away by force, it can't change the fact that his heart is with others." Muji said lightly, "Emotions need to be cultivated. The feelings between me and him are not something that ordinary people can understand. For his sake, leave here now, and I can pretend that I don't know what happened tonight. Otherwise." Muji, after a pause, looking at the beautiful woman with a voluptuous figure and graceful curves, he said softly, "Sister, you don't want Yunzhou to be completely covered by the rules of the forbidden land of life in the future, right?" The princess seemed to have her reverse scale touched, and her beautiful eyes narrowed instantly. "Yunzhou was eroded by the power of rules before. Is it really the work of the forbidden land of life? It's just a little try. If I really want to erode the rules of Yunzhou, I won't hold back at that time." Muji looked at the young man next to the princess, his voice was very calm, and he said again, "Compared to other forbidden places, I have already held back. In a sense, you should thank me." At the end, she showed a pure smile on her face, as if she was telling a sparse and ordinary thing. But such an attitude was undoubtedly a provocation in the eyes of the princess, and it also made her eyes more dangerous. The Forbidden Land is just a product abandoned in the last era. If you want to look down on the world from a high place, I'm afraid you are not qualified enough. Muji said lightly, whether you are qualified or not is not up to you. She showed a dangerous smile on her face and was about to say something. However, at this moment, she seemed to have noticed something, and a look of hesitation appeared in her eyes for the first time. After a while, the hesitation in the girl's eyes gradually turned into joy. She raised her head suddenly and stared at the direction of Yunzhou. Muzian asked doubtfully, "What's wrong?" "It's my mother's breath." Hearing Muji's words, Muzian's eyes widened almost instantly, staring at Muji. "Where is she?" Muji looked up at Muzian's eyes, with a hint of complexity in her eyes, and whispered. "She went back to the Forbidden Land of Life. It's the 27th, and it's time to reset the monthly tickets and blades." Hint. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 570. The Forbidden Land of Life is the oldest taboo place among the 9 taboo places. At the same time, it is also the most mysterious forbidden place. Even the ancient supreme being in the same forbidden place has actually never seen the true face of the Lord of Life. Most ancient creatures believe that Muji's position as the Lord of Life was passed down to her from the previous Lord of Life. However, the supreme beings obviously did not expect that the owner of the Forbidden Land of Life had been killed by a certain supreme being a long time ago. Among the 9 taboo places, only the Lord of Life was the first to die. But even if the Lord of Life dies, the power of rules in the Forbidden Land of Life will not disappear. It will become an ownerless land, and even the power of rules will slowly spread out uncontrollably. Only when a new supreme being is born in the Forbidden Land of Life one day can the power of rules spreading outward be controlled. And Muji is the supreme who was born because of this. Of course, this is the conclusion that Muzian deduced based on what Muji said before. But regardless of whether Muji is the second Lord of Life or not, it is true that she controls the taboo rules. In other words, once you step into the Forbidden Land of Life, it is equivalent to handing over the power of life and death to Muji. Not long ago, Muzian was secretly thinking that before confirming Muji's identity and origin, he could not follow her into the forbidden area of life no matter what. But now, if Mu Wange, who has been missing for tens of thousands of years, really returns to the Forbidden Land of Life, then will she be able to escape this time? Muzian fell into silence. This matter is related to the mystery of his life experience. How are you thinking about it? At this time, Muji's somewhat tentative voice sounded again, which also brought Muzian back to reality from his thoughts just now. The princess opened her mouth slightly, wanting to say something, but when she saw Muzian's expression, she couldn't help but hesitate. Although she didn't know who Mu Wange was, she could still see some clues from Muzian's expression. Muji, Muzian. This surname is inevitably a bit thought-provoking. Muji took Muzian's arm very naturally and said softly, "Come back with me, okay? You also want to see your mother, right?" Her voice was clear and sweet. Rather than being the supreme being in the Forbidden Land of Life, she looked more like a simple girl asking her brother next door for something. If outsiders saw this scene, they would probably be shocked. The supreme being in the Forbidden Land of Life actually looked like a little girl asking for mercy at this moment. Even the princess couldn't help but feel so much in her eyes when she looked at this scene. A bit weird. But then the princess reacted and said, "You can't go back with her. The rules of the Forbidden Land of Life are completely controlled by the Lord of Life. If you go back with her, if she is willing, you will not be able to come out again in the future." These words were almost like saying, if you go to the Forbidden Land of Life with Muji, she can keep you in a dark room forever if she wants. Snap. I don't know when it started to rain. The rain was pounding on the bamboo forest and falling along the bamboo leaves. When the lightning flashed, you could vaguely see the water droplets falling diagonally from the sky in the cold wind like a pearl curtain, hitting people's faces with a bit of a biting chill. But what was even more astonishing was the look in Muji's eyes. This harmless-looking girl had a chill in her eyes. She raised her head and looked at the princess. Do you really think that Yunzo can be immune to the erosion of the rules of life? She repeatedly alienated the relationship between herself and him. If it weren't for the fact that the other party seemed to have something to do with Mujian, Muji would never talk nonsense with her again. The princess took out an umbrella from her ring and stood next to Mujian. Her eyes were still gentle, but her tone was rude. I don't know what you said to him, but let him be careful. Is there anything wrong with the Supreme Being in the Forbidden Land? Whether it is the Forbidden Land of Life or other forbidden places, there is no doubt that it is a dangerous place that is respected and feared by the monks. Muji naturally understands the meaning of the princess's words. It's just, she's different from other forbidden places. At least, the attitude towards Mujian is different between the Forbidden Land of Life and other forbidden places. Other taboo places are just about coveting Mujian's body, but Muji is different. At least her feelings for Mujian are not just about coveting her body. A layer of turbid puddles had accumulated outside the bamboo forest at some point. Raindrops as big as beans smashed on the ground, creating a hazy white mist. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two gradually became tense, Mujian finally spoke, I'd better not return to the Forbidden Land of Life for the time being. Muji was startled, and her body stiffened slightly. Then, she raised her head and looked at Mujian, confused. Why? Don't you want to see your mother? The princess's eyes changed instantly, and she stared at Mujian in astonishment. Mujian's mother? He is involved with the Forbidden Land of Life? Mujian just smiled and glanced at Muji. His figure was reflected in the pretty girl's beautiful eyes. Her rosy mouth was slightly open, with confusion in her eyes. She seemed surprised that she would refuse, but that was true. After all, this was probably the perfect opportunity to meet Mu Wange, the woman who was suspected of being his mother. I missed this opportunity, and I don't know when Mu Wange will show up next time. But he actually refused. Why exactly? Muji frowned. Mujian said in a very soft voice, if she wants to see me, she will definitely find me even if I don't go to her. Seeing that Muji seemed a little unhappy, Mujian leaned close to her ear and whispered, I will definitely go to the Forbidden Land of Life to find you, but not now. Can you wait for me? The warm breath of the boy gently fell on Muji's ears. She secretly raised her eyes to look at Mujian, and her earlobes gradually became hot. She retracted her eyes as if she was electrocuted, turned her head away, and two lovely blushes appeared on her fair face, so that the indifferent and mysterious face in the past showed a drastic change of emotions. Don't regret it if she leaves later. Muji whispered unconsciously, as if to maintain a cold and elegant attitude in front of others. Mujian couldn't help but grin. Although this girl is the supreme of the Forbidden Land of Life, I don't know if it's because she hasn't left the Forbidden Land of Life for many years, she is so shy about the little intimate action. If this were placed in modern times, she would be a complete homegirl. It seems that she doesn't like this passive feeling, and she doesn't want outsiders to see the side of herself. Muji glanced at the princess casually and said lightly, what about her? Will she follow you after this? The princess raised her eyes, her beautiful eyes were moist and gentle, and she said softly, I think you don't need to care about where she is. Really, Muji sneered, if Dapen Emperor knew that you even offended the Forbidden Land of Life in order to save him, I wonder what he would think. In Juzhu, few people are actually willing to offend the Forbidden Land. After all, the supreme beings in the Forbidden Land are invincible, and they can manipulate the power of rules to erode the rules between heaven and earth. If they were not afraid of the mysterious strong man who once suppressed the 9 Forbidden Lands, the rules of the Forbidden Lands would have covered the entire Juzhu. There are very few female emperors in the demon world who are so domineering and unreasonable like Shizixuan. What if the great Peng Emperor knows? Besides, between me and Mu Xiao. The princess glanced at Muzian, her tone indifferent and gentle. I helped him for the sake of the Medicine Emperor. Medicine Emperor? Mu Ji's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt, and he subconsciously glanced at Muzian. I thought the people behind him should be in Dongzhou, at most plus a demon world. I didn't expect that he also had support in Yuzhou. No wonder. No wonder the princess helped him. At this moment, Mu Ji's hostility towards the princess eased a little. If someone else had said this to explain, Mu Ji might still have some doubts. But the princess's words were still somewhat credible. After all, even Mu Ji, who had been in the depths of the forbidden land of life for many years, had heard a little about the relationship between Yuzhou and Yunzhou. In the past, Luo Tan had been helped by the princess, and the two had a sisterly relationship. If the princess helped Muzian for Luo Tan, it would not be surprising. Mu Ji suddenly reacted, looked at Muzian, blinked her pure peach blossom eyes, and said in a delicate voice, if I remember correctly, although the Medicine Emperor of Yuzhou has not been in harmony with the Tao for a long time, she is arrogant by nature. At the beginning, the Supreme of the Forbidden Land asked her to refine pills but was rejected. When did you get involved with her? She must have tasted your spiritual energy a long time ago, right? The voice suddenly rose a few degrees. When Muzian was young, he was a simple and kind child. Mu Ji, who had never left the forbidden land of life, naturally found it hard to imagine that the boy who was shy even to touch his sister's hand would have any relationship with the Medicine King of Yuzhou. Muzian shook his head and wanted to explain, but after thinking about it, he decided to give up. After all, the princess was still watching. As a qualified Sea King, you must know that even if you want to explain, you must do so at an appropriate time. Now is not the right time. The matter between Luo Tan and me is a long story. Since mother, she is back, you should go back to the forbidden land of life to see her first. Muzian spoke at the right time and lightly passed the topic. Although she was a little reluctant to give up, Mu Ji knew at this moment that with the princess present, the other party would definitely not let her take Muzian away. If she wanted to use the forbidden object to take Muzian away, she would definitely be blocked by the princess. Instead of doing that, it is better to leave a good impression on him first. Besides, I haven't seen Mu Wanji for a long time. The last time I saw Mu Wanji was more than 10 years ago, and she left after just one meeting. The forbidden land of reincarnation, the forbidden land of immortality, and the ancient land of eternity, these three places will try every means to get you no matter what. Since you are unwilling to go back with me, you must be careful of these three forbidden places. Mu Ji stared at him with her beautiful eyes. Muzian nodded gently, and then suddenly asked, are the rules of the forbidden ancient road all controlled by the will of heaven? There is more than one will of heaven, and there is indeed one will of heaven that controls the rules of the forbidden ancient road, Mu Ji said. This should be the insurance set up by heaven to prevent the forbidden land from completely escaping its control. Once a supreme being completely controls the forbidden rules, then that forbidden land will be like the current Dongzhou restricted area, and will never be bound by heaven. Muzian showed a thoughtful look. Unconsciously, time passed silently. Because Mu Ji was worried that Mu Wanj would leave soon after returning this time, she did not delay here for too long. When Mu Ji's real body in the deep of the forbidden land of life opened her eyes, this clone also quietly dissipated like clouds and smoke. Mu Ji's departure also made Muzian and the princess who were staying in front of the bamboo forest at this moment seem to have a more ambiguous atmosphere. He looked up and asked in a low voice. Your Highness, if you stay in Dongzhou, won't the great Peng Emperor be angry? The princess took a step forward with an umbrella, and her mature and plump body gently pressed against Muzian's side, and the veil on her face covered her beautiful face, but it brought out a bit of the beauty that only wives have. She gazed at him with her beautiful eyes and shook her head gently. I told the great Peng Emperor that I would go to Yizhou first after this, so there is no need to worry about his situation. Compared to the great Peng Emperor's affairs, you are more worrying. The princess lowered her voice and said, you have realized that the 4 female supremes first noticed the existence of the natural furnace. They just want to get you, so they will not kill you, but once the other supremes know your physique, they will definitely kill you at all costs. After all, the natural furnace can only help the opposite sex. The existence of Musian is an irresistible temptation for the female supremes, but it is a huge threat to the ancient creatures in other forbidden places. Once Musian agrees to help a forbidden place, it will break the balance of the 9 forbidden places so far. Things that cannot be obtained can only be destroyed to make people feel at ease. And that Muji, you have to know how to distinguish right from wrong in what she said, the princess said again. I know how to handle this matter. Musian looked up at the beautiful wife and said with a smile, thank you for coming here for me. Since you can stay away from Yunzhou for the time being, can I ask you for a favor? The princess glanced at Musian charmingly and said, are you talking about the spiritual dragon's ascension? There was a hint of shyness and resentment in her tone. Musian smiled and said, can you please go to Lianji sect and wait for me first? The princess glanced at the young man casually and said faintly, since I have promised you that I will try to help the spiritual dragon communicate with the avenue, I will not regret it, but don't you plan to go back to Lianji sect now? Well, I have something to deal with. Musian had just said this when a thunderous sound resounded in the sky. The princess's eyes suddenly focused on the figure in the dark sky. It was a figure like a god. She was wearing a brilliant golden battle armor, and her whole body seemed to be bathed in a sacred and charming halo. Her long hair was dazzling and charming in the light, like a valkyrie, with a dignified temperament. The will of heaven. When the princess saw the goddess descending from the sky, her eyes changed a little. Why is she here? The will of heaven is the agent of heaven in Jizhu. Only when there are cultivators who violate the rules of heaven and earth, she will descend and impose heavenly punishment on those who violate the rules. But there was no one else in this bamboo forest except her and Musian. Almost at the moment when the will of heaven descended, there were also many places in Jizhu where people noticed the strange phenomenon here, and many cultivators had a bit more solemnity and fear in their eyes. From the past to the present, whenever the will of heaven descended, it meant that there would be an unlucky person who would be punished by heaven. What are you doing here? When she saw the expressionless and cold face of the woman descending from the sky, the princess held an umbrella in front of Musian, and looked at this goddess with a gentle look. But she had been quietly alert in her heart. It is obvious that the will of heaven is aimed at Musian. Miss Tiandao looked past the princess and fell on Musian behind her. He violated the rules of heaven and earth, and he must be punished by heaven. The princess frowned slightly. He did not pass the tribulation, so how can he violate the rules of heaven? Miss Tiandao's eyes were calm and indifferent. The will of heaven does not need to be explained to others when enforcing the rules. You should step down, otherwise you will also violate the rules of heaven and earth. The princess sneered, I want to see how much power the will of heaven can exert. She has made up her mind not to give in no matter what. Let me talk to her alone. You go to the sect and wait for me first. However, at this moment, Musian, who had been keeping quiet, suddenly spoke. The princess' voice was gentle, but it was different from her usual coldness. She said, you don't have to give in to her. I am in harmony with the Dao, and I am not bound by the heavenly Dao. I want to see how the heavenly Dao will punish me. Musian put his hand on the back of her hand, gently held it, and whispered, believe me, there will be no problem. At this time, Miss Tiandao suddenly said, he didn't violate many rules, and it won't hurt his life and origin. The princess frowned slightly, took a deep look at the goddess in the fairy gold armor, and then looked at Musian, who nodded slightly and gave her a look of affirmation. In the end, The princess nodded silently. I know, then I'll go to Lianji sect to wait for you. Although it is unknown which rule Musian violated between heaven and earth, judging from the attitude of the heavenly Dao, it should not be a serious matter. But logically speaking, as long as the violation of the rules of heaven and earth is not particularly serious, the will of heaven will not personally go down to the realm to carry out heaven's punishment. Why did he encounter such treatment? Is it because his talent is too high? Until she tore open the rift in space and left, the princess still had a lingering doubt in her heart. Well, master, I'm really sorry for being so disrespectful to you just now. Deep in the bamboo forest is a small courtyard with a single family. In front of the courtyard, Miss Tiandeo in armor is lying next to the boy like a well-behaved cat. Musian gently stroked Miss Tiandeo's silky hair. Looking at Miss Tiandeo, who was as majestic as a Valkyrie in front of others, but as well-behaved as a cat behind others, she said warmly, "You are doing very well. When you are in the outside world, you are indeed the majesty of the will of heaven should be maintained, otherwise there will be trouble if everyone dares to violate the rules of heaven and earth." "Yes, my master." There was a hint of tenderness in her cold voice. "You appear suddenly. You must have something to say, right?" Musian suddenly asked. "Other heavenly wills are now aware of your existence and regard you as a heretic, so as long as you show any signs of violating the rules of heaven and earth, you will be punished by heaven," Miss Tiandeo said vaguely. "In other words, everything I do from now on will be observed by other wills of heaven with a magnifying glass." Musian was a little stunned. He soon smiled. "Are you here to tell me because you want to help me?" Musian asked softly. "Yes, but there are limits to what I can do. Even if I don't impose heavenly punishment in the future, other wills of heaven will do the same," Miss Tiandeo said. As a will divided by heaven, it stands to reason that she should not favor a certain monk from Kyushu. But no matter what, as long as you try the aura of the Tian Tian furnace once, you will never forget it. Such a wonderful aura, even Miss Tiandeo, who is like a machine, does not want it to be completely erased by other companions and never be able to taste it again. So as long as the other wills of heaven give up the idea of imposing heavenly punishment on me, or they hand over all their power to you, will I no longer be punished by heaven in the future?" Musian suddenly asked. "That's true in theory, but it's very difficult to operate in practice. I can indeed swallow the power of other Tiandeo wills, but they must be willing," Miss Tiandeo said. "But this is a very difficult thing. No heavenly will is willing to hand over its authority to others. This is a very obvious thing. Although the will of heaven does not have human emotions, the lack of emotions does not mean that there will be no desire at all. At least, they would not be willing to hand over their authority to other companions. Miss Tiandeo, as the No One, knows this very well." "Yeah, this is indeed a difficult thing." Musian gently stroked Miss Tiandeo's silky hair. Looking at the obedient posture of the flawless beauty in front of him, he couldn't help but reach out and gently lift her snow-white arrogant chin. "But if you are willing to take control of all authority and become the only representative of heaven's way in Kyushu." Musian looked down at her eyes and whispered in a gentle tone, "I'm here to help you." 6,000 words were successfully completed, which is equivalent to 3 chapters. Yesterday I was a little embarrassed to ask for votes because I wrote so little, but this time I can confidently ask for a wave of monthly ticket blades at the end of the month, right? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 571. Although it sounds a bit difficult to let Miss Tiandeo control all the power, it is actually not as difficult as imagined. After all, Miss Tiandeo no one can share her feelings with other Tiandeo wills, and it is precisely because of this that no two who appeared in the forbidden ancient road at that time was so wary of Musian. Number 2, and even other Tiandeo wills know the beauty of the natural furnace, so they dare not try it easily, for fear that they will sink into it uncontrollably like no one. Are you interested in controlling other powers of Tiandeo in Jizhu? Musian looked at Miss Tiandeo, who was lying in his arms and wrapped in a battle armor made of fairy gold, and asked again. After hearing Musian's words, she immediately raised her head and looked over. Master wants to transfer the power of other Tiandeo wills to me alone. Her voice was still cold and beautiful, but for the first time, her eyes showed doubt and confusion. Although the heavenly authority can be transferred as long as other heavenly wills are willing, how can other heavenly wills transfer authority to others? Authority is the symbol of heavenly will in the human world. Once the authority is transferred, it means that they choose to submit to another heavenly will, and even merge with it. They will never agree, so don't think about it. Miss Tiandeo spoke again soon. Musian looked at her and smiled slightly. Just tell me if you want it or not. As for whether the authority can be transferred to you, that is something I need to consider. They all regard you as a heretic now. If you can get their authority, in a sense, it will be good for you and me. Although Miss Tiandeo still had some doubts about what Musian wanted to do, she immediately gave her answer after hearing his question. Recently, because of other heavenly wills, she has not been convenient to come to Musian. After all, the heavenly Deo is the gathering of all living things, and the heavenly Deo will is a ray of spiritual energy differentiated from the heavenly Deo. If you frequently get close to Musian, it is equivalent to blaspheming all living things. Although it will not have any impact, but if the living things in this world know about this, the impact will be great. Other heavenly Deo wills will not allow such a thing to happen. Now they regard Musian as a heretic. If she goes to see Musian frequently at this time, other heavenly Deo wills may kill him at all costs. If she can use the authority of other heavenly Deo wills for her own use, in the future, even if she comes to Jizhu to see Musian in the form of a human, she will not be stopped by anyone. What does the master need me to do? Miss Tiandeo raised her indifferent and emotionless eyes and looked at Musian, but there was still a faint blush on her expressionless and cold face. In fact, you don't have to do anything, as long as you and I do something together. Musian smiled and said softly. Seeing the doubt and confusion in Miss Tiandeo's cold eyes, Musian asked casually, can you share your feelings completely with other Tiandeo wills? Miss Tiandeo's beautiful eyes like glass could not help but flash. Her expression was a little hesitant, and after the hesitation, she showed a sudden realization. She already knew what Musian was going to do. Seeing that Miss Tiandeo was still silent, Musian couldn't help but sigh. If you don't want to, forget it. I don't like to force others. Why do you want to help me control the power of Jizhu so much? Being so good to me, there is no benefit for you, right? Miss Tiandeo's flawless and transparent eyes like gems sparkled with luster, and she looked at Musian without blinking, and couldn't help asking. She is an incarnation of the will differentiated from Tiandeo, and she had previously imposed heavenly punishment on Musian. Although she later seemed to submit to Musian and even called him master, Musian was not stupid and could not have known that she actually had no human emotions and called him that just to satisfy his XP and his natural furnace aura. And maybe it was the mission of heaven that she approached Musian to make him relax. Although she did not understand human emotions, she knew very well what kind of beauty she had among female cultivators. Such beauty could indeed make men fascinated. But Musian had seen too many outstanding women before that. The fairy appearance of the Qing emperor alone was enough to make him immune to the so-called beautiful faces of women. What's more, he was a natural furnace, and a natural furnace in the Yuhua realm. If he wanted, as long as he opened his mouth, there would be countless beautiful women from the ancient families in Jizhu who would offer themselves to him. Not to mention the ancient families, even the four supremes in the Forbidden Land were very jealous of him and wanted to take him back to the Forbidden Land to pamper him. And those supreme beings, each of them has an excellent appearance, the Lord of Life even has two forms. In other words, Musian was not fascinated by her appearance, but simply wanted to help her. That is why Miss Tiendeo was confused. What exactly did Master Mu intend for her? Even if he helped her and let her control all the authority of Tiendeo's will, she could not become Musian's property, nor could she use these authorities to please him. Why are you willing to help me like this? Are you just happy to help others? Miss Tiendeo asked softly, with a bit of confusion in her tone. Taking all the power, this was indeed an offer she couldn't refuse, but she still hesitated. Don't forget that Musian helped her with so many things, but she couldn't help when Musian asked for something, that would be too embarrassing. Musian didn't seem surprised by Miss Tiendeo's hesitation. If Miss Tiendeo accepted it happily at this moment, he would only think there was a problem. Are you worried that after you gain all the authority in the future, you won't be able to do something when I ask you to do it, so are you hesitating now? Musian asked in a gentle tone. Although Miss Tiendeo is not a human being, her current way of thinking seems to be somewhat human. On the one hand, she was tempted by his proposal, but on the other hand, she was afraid that she would feel guilty if he couldn't do anything he proposed in the future. Hearing Musian's question, Miss Tiendeo nodded expressionlessly. My actions are based on the rules of heaven and earth, so what I do must not violate the rules of heaven and earth. Even if I have all the authority, I can't be used by you. Once I do this, I will no longer be me, but will become an ordinary person who has lost his godhead, and even I will disappear as a result. In fact, she had always had a vague feeling that Musian would help her because he hoped to get something from her. I do need your help with some things, but it has nothing to do with violating the rules of heaven and earth, so you don't have to worry, Musian said with a smile. He was not worried that Miss Tiendeo would rebel afterwards. The god in front of him was indeed intoxicated with the Tien Tien cauldron. This was easily seen from the fact that she would specifically come to snitch this time to make him careful. However, Miss Tiendeo is worried that after helping her, she will make her do things that violate the rules of heaven and earth in the future. That's why she hesitates now. What does Master need from me? After hearing Musian's words, Miss Tiendeo's beautiful eyes flashed and she couldn't help but ask. Musian looked into those cold and beautiful eyes and said with a smile, I don't need you to do anything. I just don't want to be stopped by other wills of heaven when I am with you in the future. He thought for a while, if I have to say it, what I really need you to do is to be with me. Master, what you said is difficult for people to understand. I am always around all living things in this world, and naturally I am always around you, Miss Tiendeo said expressionlessly. Musian chuckled lightly, took her hand and asked her to sit next to him. Then, a hand gently placed on the back of Miss Tiendeo's hand and whispered, it's different from what you said. I just hope that you can always be by my side in private from now on. She asked, to put it bluntly, are you greedy for my body? Musian was startled. He didn't expect that this incarnation of the will of heaven would be so straightforward. After thinking about it, he still said with a frank smile, I'm greedy for your body and want to be with you. Hearing this, Miss Tiendeo's demeanor changed slightly, and a strange emotional luster seemed to flash in her glass-like eyes. I'm sorry, please let me collect my emotions for a moment. Miss Tiendeo patted her face gently and tried hard to maintain a calm demeanor. But for some reason, after slightly pursed her lips, the corners of Miss Tiendeo's lips still couldn't help but curve up slightly. Musian looked a little dazed and said hesitantly, so do you still have human feelings? Miss Tiendeo shook her head gently, that's not a human emotion. It's just the joy that comes from being confessed like this for the first time and curiously analyzing what emotions women should have at this time. Although she said this, she couldn't help but secretly look at the young man a few more times. She never expected that he would express his love to the incarnation of the will of heaven. If any creature in Juz who dares to speak like this, it will be regarded as blasphemy by Miss Tiendeo, which will trigger the heavenly tribulation and kill it. But when Musian said this, her face felt a little hot and her heart was inexplicably agitated. What kind of answer is this? Because you want to be with her, do you want to hand over all other powers of heaven's will to her? Isn't he afraid that he will change his mind after having all the power and directly inflict the 9 worlds of heavenly tribulation on him and kill him? After all, when Musian realized the heavenly tribulation, she had imposed the heavenly tribulation on him from the beginning. No. He was probably just joking. After all, there were so many outstanding women around him, so there was no way he would fall in love with her and want to stay with her forever. This is ridiculous. The demon world, the forbidden land of immortality. This place is gloomy all year round, and no living thing can survive in the immortal forbidden land. There are dead bones everywhere, they are all left by the geniuses of the past, the elders of the ancient families, and even some powerful casual cultivators. They tried to seek opportunities by entering the immortal forbidden land, but soon after entering the immortal forbidden land, they were drained of their essence and died. One of the rules of the immortal forbidden land, anyone who sets foot in it to obtain its heavenly materials and earthly treasures will be drained of their essence until death. In the deepest part of the immortal forbidden land, a woman with wheat-colored skin slowly opened her eyes. She was wearing an exotic dress, with large areas of skin exposed to the air. She wore a golden hair ornament that looked like the eye of Horus on her forehead, and a complex and coquettish mark on her back. Isis felt this anger for the first time. The servants of the immortal forbidden land not far from her feet were all kneeling on both sides, their bodies trembling slightly. This was the first time Isis was born as a clone, but she was slapped in the face in public. It wasn't a verbal slap in the face, but a physical slap in the face. Even if it was just a clone of her, it still represented the immortal forbidden land. It was obvious how much that beautiful snake valued Musian, so that she would not hesitate to offend the immortal forbidden city for him. When she thought of this, the eyes of this exotic beauty were filled with coldness, her jade hands were clenched, and her heart was full of anger. "Do the people sent out have any news about Shizixuan?" Isis asked in a cold voice. Someone immediately responded. The queen of the demon realm did not respond, but another powerful Longsu ancient emperor of the demon realm said. He hesitated, not sure whether he should finish his sentence. "Speak clearly," Isis said quietly, suppressing the anger in her heart. Ancient Emperor Longsu said that this matter is a private matter between the immortal lord and the queen of the demon realm, so if anything happens, you can confront the queen of the demon realm in person. Confrontation in person, Isis smiled instead of getting angry. What's the use of confronting someone face to face? What she wanted was never a confrontation about who lost and who won, but a sincere apology from Shizixuan. But judging from the current attitude of the demon world, there is no intention to apologize at all. This time, the queen of the demon realm slap in the restricted area not only hit Isis's clone, but also made everyone in Kyushu know that the demon realm is a force that overrides the immortal forbidden land. This time the demon realm made a name for itself, but it only tarnished the face of the immortal forbidden land. It seems that after being dormant in the immortal forbidden land for too long, the younger generations have forgotten who was in charge of Kyushu. Isis's charming and enchanting face was covered with frost. "Starting from today, you will bring Musian to the immortal forbidden land to see me at all costs." She looked down at the servants in the immortal forbidden land and said quietly, "I would like to see if the queen of the demon world would dare to set foot in the immortal forbidden land if she knew he was there. If Master Zixuan doesn't dare, then wait until then to see how her lover will be intoxicated with her body." Lianji sect. The princess at this moment naturally didn't know what was happening on Musian's side. She just came to Lianji sect according to Musian's request and tried to help Linglong communicate with the Dao. The princess actually knew a little bit about Musian's relationship with other women, but she didn't mind. After all, the only people who know about the relationship between Musian and her now are Kingdi and Luotan, and at best there will be a spirit dragon added to them now. This feeling of being secretly intimate with a woman who was hiding from him, was pretty good. Today's princess has completely fallen in love with the pleasure of this kind of affair. Not long after, the princess arrived at Tianhe Garden where Musian had lived before. There is his remaining aura here. For a being who is born close to the Dao, he can naturally easily sense his aura. Of course, more importantly, she noticed that the spirit dragon was also here. Entering the courtyard, as expected, I saw a young lady with disheveled silver hair. She was holding a large bowl in her hand. In the bowl was a bowl of carefully cooked 8 treasure crane soup. There was also a dinner plate placed beside the table. On the plate is roasted tender and juicy crane meat. Sitting next to Lin Ling was a strange woman, wearing a gorgeous long dress, with a mature and intellectual temperament between her brows and eyes, looking at the princess with surprised eyes. If we put it in modern times, it would be the style of a female teacher. Sensing the princess aura, Lin Ling raised her head and looked over. She blinked her red eyes and tilted her head to look at her in confusion, AAA. As if asking, "What are you doing here?" The woman beside Lin Ling stood up and bowed very respectfully. The junior master of the library, Yan Ruyu, has met the senior. Although the identity of this person is not known, it is not difficult to tell from the restrained aura of the other person that this is also an old monster who has been practicing for an unknown amount of time. Yan Ruyu? Are you Musian's master? The princess was a little surprised, she didn't expect to see her here. He mentioned you before. He said that it was thanks to you that he was able to stay in the sect, the princess said. Yan Ruyu showed a gentle smile and said softly, that child's talent is already excellent. Even if there are no juniors, there will be others who will accept him as an inner disciple. The princess smiled and nodded. She could see that the master's cauldron in the library in front of her was very solid, which was why he was able to reach the peak of returning to the void so quickly. It's a pity that the rules of heaven and earth have not changed in the past, and the monk's cultivation speed is too slow. If the rules of heaven and earth had changed earlier, maybe Yan Ruyu would have been a strong person in the realm of enlightenment. While the princess was secretly observing the guide on Musian's path to immortality, Yan Ruyu was also secretly observing the senior. She sighed in her heart. When Emperor Qing set his sights on Musian, she had already realized that this disciple would probably achieve great things in the future. But Yan Ruyu still didn't expect that this guy's achievements were indeed not low, but his more accomplishments were in fish farming. Now there are countless beautiful women in Zhuzhou secretly watching him. If Musian is willing, most of the female cultivators would be willing to get close to him. What are you doing here? Lin Ling asked, holding up the notebook, leaving a greasy stain on the notebook with her fingers. The princess asked softly, what do you think? Lin Ling was stunned, and her face showed hesitation. Then, she carefully tore off a finger-sized piece of crane skin from the plate and handed it to her. I can only give you this much. The princess. Thank you, but I'm not here to eat with you. After a moment, the princess replied speechlessly. Lin Ling seemed relieved to know that she was not here to compete with him for the 8 treasure crane, and then continued to write in the notebook, then why are you looking for me? He is not in Tianhe Garden now. The princess silently looked at this silver-haired beauty, with a delicate expression, skin whiter than snow, small red lips as delicate as cherries, and bread crumbs that had just been eaten with soup at the corners of her mouth. Looking at the girl's innocent red eyes, and thinking about what she might do later, a complex look flashed across the princess's beautiful eyes. It was hard to imagine that such a simple girl would enjoy the natural furnace with her later. Such a scene was hard to imagine. If she told Ling Long the purpose of her trip now, I wonder what Lin Ling's reaction would be? Just as the princess was full of entanglement, she suddenly vaguely noticed that a figure seemed to be quietly coming not far behind her. The princess glanced inadvertently, and the boy had come to the villa from the torn space crack. As if he noticed the princess's sight, Musian raised his head and looked over, and then showed her a gentle smile. Fortunately, the veil covered her face, so it was difficult to see the princess's blushing face under the veil. She glanced at Musian and said softly, "You came at the right time, tell her about that yourself." Lin Ling looked at the princess, then her beautiful eyes fell on Musian, and she tilted her head slightly. AAA. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 572. When he noticed Lin Ling's gaze, Musian did not answer immediately, but looked to the side of the beautiful pavilion master who looked intellectual and elegant. "Pavilion Master Yan, why are you here?" Musian asked with a smile, his tone as respectful as ever. Yan Ruya glanced sideways at the young man and said, "If you have nothing to do, can't I come to your garden to have a look?" "The master is welcome to come whenever he wants." "I'm just a little curious as to why you are with Senior Linglong," Musian said with a smile, although his current level is slightly higher than that of Yan Ruyu, but Musian has always been a person who knows how to know and to bow, so naturally he still respects Yan Ruyu very much. Hearing this, Yan Ruyu's beautiful eyes were a little softer, and her expression was a little emotional. She didn't expect that Musian would reach enlightenment so quickly after leaving Lianji sect. Today, a disciple reported that a silver dragon appeared on Kanghai Peak. I guessed that maybe Senior Linglong had taken a liking to the 8 treasure crane raised by Senior Brother Yi Hao, so I took a special look, and I happened to bump into it on the main peak. After that, I asked the people at the medicine hall to use the 8 treasure cranes as ingredients for Senior Linglong to enjoy, Yan Ruyu explained with a smile. Musian was startled. "Does Yi Xiaozhuo still have the 8 treasure crane?" Yan Ruyu said with a hint of helplessness in her tone. The 8 treasure crane was originally a treasure used to reward the inner disciples, but during this period the 8 treasure crane disappeared frequently. Senior Brother Yi Hao also knew that it was who did it, so he used elixirs to speed up the cultivation of some 8 treasure cranes. It's just that these 8 treasure cranes no longer have the same effect as before. Understand, that's the difference between free range and artificial breeding. Lin Ling put up a small book and commented, "The quality of the meat is worse than the original, not tender enough." Musian, so Lord Yi hopes that Senior Linglong can leave him 2 orthodox 8 treasure cranes. For some reason, he suddenly sympathized with Yi Xiaozhuo. Yan Ruya shook her head gently. Senior Linglong gave Senior Brother Yi Hao a fortune not long ago. At this moment, he is still secretly enjoying himself in his cave. Thinking about it, even if Senior Linglong eats all the 8 treasure cranes, he will no comments either. Luck should be something that is innate, and only beings like Spirit Dragon can directly give others luck. But even a spiritual dragon cannot grant luck to others frequently, otherwise it would not have given luck to a small number of disciples in the form of assessment. It can be said that luck is an extremely precious thing. No wonder Yi Hao was happy. With the blessing of luck, he will have an even smoother journey in cultivating immortality in the future. This news has not spread yet. If it spreads to the top of other main peaks, I'm afraid I don't know how jealous I will be. You have indeed gained enlightenment now, but that doesn't mean you won't face any threats in Kyushu. Now several taboo places in Kyushu are about to move. After you come back this time, try not to leave again. Yan Ruyu suddenly warned in a warm voice, "The formation within the sect can ensure your safety, but it will be different if you leave the section." Musian nodded slightly. "Thank you, Pavilion Master, for reminding me. This disciple understands. When I come back this time, I really don't plan to leave the sect again for the time being." When Lin Ling heard this, her eyes suddenly lit up, and her beautiful eyes looked straight at him. Yan Ruyu watched the scene silently, thinking that Linglong had a close relationship with Musian back then, but there seemed to be no such ambiguous atmosphere at that time. But now the way Senior Lin Ling looked at Musian, but something feels a little wrong. At this time, Lin Ling held up a small book and asked, "What did the Princess Dao say just now?" "Feathering and ascending." Musian reached out and gently rubbed her silver hair, and asked, "Where is your enlightenment flower?" I haven't eaten it yet because it takes a long time to refine it. Linling took out a translucent flower from her arms and handed it to Musian. Musian smiled, I know, that's why I asked the princess to help you. Why do you need her help in refining the enlightenment flower? Linling tilted his head slightly and wrote in a small notebook. Musian did not answer directly this time. Instead, he picked up the small notebook in her hand, wrote something on it, and then handed it to her. When her red eyes fell on the contents of the small book, Linling was stunned for a moment, and she didn't even realize that the roasted crane meat in her hand fell to the ground. This is the fastest way I can think of for you to ascend to heaven, and it's also the best way to get rid of the interference of karma fire forever. Musian said with a hint of sincerity and helplessness in his tone, although it will be a bit harder for me, I can still endure the hard work. The princess glanced at him, with a hint of shyness and resentment in her gentle and lovely peach blossom eyes, and a trace of resentment on her face under the veil. It's as if he has lost money. In fact, in a sense, Musian did not take advantage. After all, he may have to make a lot of sacrifices this time for the spiritual dragon to ascend. Even for a princess, it would take a lot of energy to use the flower of enlightenment to influence the avenue. The best way to speed up her path is to have Musian supply her with the flower of enlightenment. This requires consuming hundreds of millions of spiritual energy. Actually, I don't care whether I can become an immortal or not, Linling suddenly wrote in a small notebook. Before Musian spoke, she looked up at him and said, but if I can help you after I ascend to heaven, I am willing to try. In the past, some of Linling's words and spirits could only be effective in Lianji sect, because the formation in the sect isolated the way of heaven, so Linling could not be restricted by the rules of heaven. But even if she was not restricted by the rules of heaven, she would be backlashed by cause and effect, and cause and effect was the origin of the birth of karma fire. But if she could ascend to heaven, Linling would be able to use most of her words and spirits in the future without being backlashed by cause and effect. Seeing the contents of the small book, Musian was stunned for a moment. Yes, Linling was born to be a creature loved by heaven, a gathering of luck, and she was simple by nature and didn't care whether she could ascend to heaven. After all, because of the blessing of thousands of luck, she herself was an immortal existence. From the beginning, he entered a misunderstanding. In fact, not all great powers are interested in ascending to heaven. At least, Linling was not very interested in the ascension from the beginning. Musian was silent for a while, then said, "Thank you, but I may have to wrong you." Linling peeked at Musian's face, and then glanced at the equally shy princess, who was so nervous that even the 8-treasure crane in her hand was instantly no longer fragrant. "No wrong." She continued to write in the small notebook, "I'm going to take a medicinal bath." After she finished writing, she lowered her head and stood up, and went to the room next to her. "I'm going to take a medicinal bath too." As if she felt that the current atmosphere was a bit awkward, the princess also quietly stood up and left. "What's going on that makes me feel a little embarrassed?" Musian felt the awkward atmosphere in the air, and couldn't help but secretly complain in his heart. At this time, Yan Ruyu also stood up. Musian was stunned. The pavilion master is also going to take a bath. The intellectual beauty was stunned for a moment, then understood something, and immediately woke up and glared at him. "Do you think that after you have realized the truth, you can even tease your nominal master?" Musian shook his head. "Pavilion master Yan is not my master. I have always regarded you as my benefactor in joining the section." Yan Ruyu was stunned for a moment, then smiled with relief. "Yes, since you joined the sect, the help I have given is indeed limited, and I am indeed not worthy of being your master. What's more, I chose you to be the inner disciple of my library at the beginning. In fact, I also took a fancy to you." "Natural furnace?" Musian asked tentatively. Yan Ruya chuckled and said, "But then you saved Fairy Yao Meng. With her in your furnace all the time, neither I nor other chiefs could make a move." Yan Ruyu was relieved by Musian's exposure. Although she occasionally regretted not being able to taste the spiritual energy of the natural furnace, but if she really had sex with Musian at that time, she would probably feel guilty and even sorry. Perhaps doing so could get the natural furnace, but it might affect her own Tao heart, and it would be difficult to make any progress in the realm. After all, she had a purpose in accepting Musian as an inner disciple from the beginning, and this matter made her feel sorry for Musian from the beginning. Otherwise, she would not have compensated Musian with a second-grade technique at that time. In this way, Fairy Yao Meng helped her and even the other three chiefs a lot. After all, Musian already had Bairuoxi as his Taoist partner at that time. If I use my position to impose rules on Musian, it will inevitably affect my Tao heart. As for why Fairy Yao Meng did not affect my Tao heart, I can only say that either the fairy's Tao heart is too strong, or the fairy simply thinks that it is nothing to cheat on Musian's Taoist partner. It is even a very pleasant thing. Yan Ruyu naturally did not know which possibility it was, and she was not very interested in it. She just looked at Musian and said in a gentle tone, "No matter what, I didn't do anything to you after all. Saints judge by deeds, not by heart. I have also completed my mission as your guide to the end. You won't blame me for having ulterior motives towards you at the beginning, right?" Yan Ruyu asked in a slightly joking tone. This was said with great relief, and it was also a farewell to the past self who had fantasies about Musian. She actually appeared here today, and suddenly thought that since Ling Long was here, she might be able to see Musian here. After she spoke out her thoughts, she would no longer feel guilty towards Musian. "Pavilion Master, is there a possibility that I actually knew you had other intentions towards me?" Musian asked suddenly with a faint smile on his face. Yan Ruyu was stunned, and then stunned for a long time, and suddenly reacted, raised her head and looked at Musian. "You knew it a long time ago." She thought she had not exposed her purpose, but she didn't expect that Musian already knew the reason why she invited him to become an inner disciple at that time. After coming back to her senses, Yan Ruyu was slightly stunned, and the appreciation that she had originally had for the younger generation disappeared, and was replaced by the shame that gradually surged in her heart. She glared at him. "Some things don't need to be said even if you know them. Can't you let me say goodbye properly and leave in peace?" There was no disgust or annoyance in her tone, but it was more like a scolding. "Are Pavilion Master Yan really planning to say goodbye to me for the last time?" Musian laughed. "Natural spiritual bodies have a great increase in spiritual perception and even some human emotions." Earlier, Musian vaguely felt that Yan Ruyu seemed to be worried, so she was saying goodbye to him. Unexpectedly, he really guessed it right. Musian suddenly looked at Yan Ruyu mysteriously and said, "By the way, Pavilion Master Yan, I will tell you another secret." Yan Ruyu's beautiful eyes flickered, and she stared at Musian hesitantly. Musian looked around and confirmed that there was no one. Then he stepped forward and whispered in her ear, "In fact, I have been waiting for you to cheat on me." Cheating. Before Yan Ruyu could even react, Musian had already put his arm around her plump and attractive waist. Even through a layer of clothes, he could feel the thrilling softness of that delicate body. Yan Ruyu's mind was still in a state of confusion for Musian's sneak attack. Her body instinctively clamped her legs and lowered her hips, trying to break free from his embrace. However, without using her spiritual energy, she could not break free from Musian's hand at all. But if she used her spiritual energy now, it would inevitably alarm Ling Long and the mysterious senior. Maybe it would also attract the senior sister from Daofeng, and then it would be really troublesome. Yan Ruyu suppressed her inner throbbing, frowned slightly, and said angrily, "Do you know what you are doing?" Although she tried her best to maintain her dignity as an elder, her tone was shy, more like a little woman scolding and acting coquettish. "I just want to satisfy Pavilion Master Yan's wish." Musian stared into her eyes and whispered, "I don't have that wish anymore." Yan Ruyu put her hands on Musian's chest, as if trying to push him away, Don't do that, I am your elder. In terms of lifespan and seniority in the sect, Yan Ryu is indeed much higher than Musian. The moment these words came out, Musian's hands around Yan Ryu froze for a moment, and he almost broke down in a second. But he did not let go of her hand. Instead, he hugged her waist tightly and said softly, "Master Yan, in fact, in my heart, I have always regarded you as my benefactor. If it were not for you, I would probably still be a small outer disciple, and would not receive the care of other chiefs." Yan Ryu glared at him. "Do you know what you are doing now?" Being hugged so closely by a big boy who was much younger than her, and the other party said that he regarded her as a benefactor while hugging her so closely in his arms, Yan Ryu was so angry that she laughed. Seeing that Musian did not speak, she suddenly raised her head and was about to speak. However, the moment she raised her head, Musian had just lowered his head and occupied her plump and rosy little mouth. Yan Ryu's body suddenly stiffened, staring at Musian's eyes, and said in a tone of anger and shame, "Is this how you treat your benefactor?" Musian smiled, "Of course, I am a person who knows how to repay kindness." Before Yan Ryu spoke again, Musian sent another message, "Master Yan, if you have any troubles, you may as well tell me. Perhaps, I can help you." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 573. Yan Ryu instinctively wanted to resist Musian's behavior of being unruly and making sneak attacks whenever they disagreed, and pushed him away. But as Musian's questioning ended, her beautiful eyes widened instantly, seeming a little surprised. Soon Yan Ryu came back to her senses, looked at this handsome face, frowned, and said angrily, "I have nothing to worry about, but you, do you know what you are doing now? If Senior Spirit Dragon comes out and sees it at this time." There was a reprimand in the tone of an elder lecturing a younger one, but it was not difficult to tell from her expression that Yan Ryu was not at all disgusted, but rather showed care for her disciples. Musian put his arms around her slender waist, looked at this intellectual woman in her prime, and said softly, "Is Pavilion Master Yan just worried about being discovered by Senior Linglong? So you are actually concerned about this kind of thing now. Actually, you're not disgusted, are you?" Feeling the young man's warm chest, and realizing that her delicate body was tightly held in his arms at the moment, Yan Ryu's eyes fell into a trance. She immediately woke up, her fair face was stained with a blush, she turned away and spat, "I shouldn't have accepted you as an inner disciple of my library in the first place. Now that I have enlightened, not only do I not know how to be grateful, but I still act, bad thoughts. Pavilion Master is still one step away from enlightenment. I'm just here to help you." Musian chuckled. "You should be able to feel the spiritual energy of the Tian Tian furnace now, right?" Yan Ryu was stunned for a moment, and then after noticing Musian's eyes, she quickly realized what he meant by the natural furnace cauldron aura. I don't feel anything." After saying that, she tried her best to maintain the dignified and indifferent image she had shown in front of her disciples in the past, and said in a gentle tone, "I will not mention today's matter to anyone, and you must not continue to make mistakes." Musian looked at this woman silently, never letting go of his arms tightly around her delicate body. He thought of Gong Lianyu for no reason, and felt that Yan Ryu's personality was exactly the same as that of the palace owner, and her arrogant demeanor of wanting but being tough-tongued was almost exactly the same. Gong Lingyu and Bai Ruoxi have a relationship between the sword body and the blade. No matter who controls the body, the other person can get the same feeling in the world of the heart. At that time, Gong Lianyu was often rude, saying that she had no interest in the natural furnace cauldron. It was only because Bai Ruoxi wanted the aura of the natural furnace cauldron that she reluctantly accepted it. As a result, after Bai Ruoxi forcibly changed her spiritual consciousness and let Gong Lianyu take control of her body, Gong Lianyu couldn't help it after a while and gave in half pushed and half on the spot. Even halfway through, Musian took the initiative and Gong Lianyu took the initiative. In fact, in Musian's fish pond, the girls who are most coaxed are not girls like Sister Lingxian and Sister Qian'er, nor the innocent and kind-hearted Miss Linglong, but tsundere like Gong Lianyu. Although she has the best combat power in the world, in terms of relationships, Gong Lianyu can be said to be inferior to even Xiaobai. Rather than engaging in intrigues, she prefers to directly use her bronze sword to cut off all worries. As for Linglong, she is naive, but not stupid. She actually knows that Musian has many bad intentions, and even knows when Musian is lying, but she is usually too lazy to expose them. Because this would put Musian in trouble. But if you accidentally make the spirit dragon lady anxious, you may have to suffer a spell of spiritual magic. For example, Musian will be obsessed with me all night long. Or it could be something like Musian cannot give others the natural furnace aura or something like that. As thoughts flashed in her mind, Yan Ruyu's delicate body had already escaped from the embrace lightly. Her soft little hands gently caressed Musian's face. She said warmly, "You are now married to Fairy Yao Meng, although it is not really true. We got married, but in the end it was a wedding witnessed by countless people in Kyushu. Besides, the relationship between you and me is special after all. If we are seen by other disciples in the sect in the future, there will inevitably be some rumors." Hearing this, Musian looked at her blankly. Yan Ruyu has soft eyebrows and eyes, a faint smile on her face, and her skin is firm. But what is even more rare is the mature charm that time has deposited on her body, and the care and tenderness in her eyes that an elder should have when treating a disciple. For Yan Ruyu, although she initially chose Musian purely because she found out that he was born with a body, but after getting along with this inner disciple for a while, she gradually became more and more interested in this fair and good-looking disciple. Somewhat favorable. But at that time, she always felt a little sorry for Musian, and Musian, a little cabbage, hadn't grown up yet, so she never made a move. But he didn't expect that he would enter the pilgrimage hall and rescue the spiritual consciousness of Fairy Yao Meng. Moreover, the fairy also favored Musian. It turns out that Pavilion Master Yan is always thinking about me, so is he rejecting me now? Musian looked at Yan Ruyu's mature and sexy face, and was stunned for a moment. Soon afterwards, as if he had lost all his strength, he let go of his hand that was holding his slender waist. "Sorry, my disciple was too willful just now." Yan Ruyu was stunned for a moment, looking at Musian whose face was filled with disappointment and said nothing. Musian turned his head slightly and looked at the sect disciples outside Tianhe Garden who occasionally passed by with their swords, his expression full of melancholy and loneliness. "I know that in Pavilion Master Yan's mind, I must be a frequent liar, right? However, what I said to you before was actually sincere. When I was useless, you were the only one who took the lead in choosing me as the inner disciple of the library. At that time, I actually suspected whether you had discovered the secret of the natural furnace body. At that time, Musian was not only suspicious, but it was better to say that he had already confirmed this matter. To be honest, I was looking forward to it at that time, but I was a little nervous." When he said this, Musian paused slightly, tilted his head and looked at him, his eyes melancholy, "Because I have always secretly admired you, I was looking forward to whether I could have a good story with you at that time, but I was also a little nervous in my heart, worried that if you knew that I had other ideas about you at that time, would you look down on me?" In fact, a large part of these words were Musian's true words. He did have some ideas about Yan Ruyu at that time, and he was afraid that if the other party knew what he was thinking, he would alienate him. So he never revealed his thoughts. Yan Ruyu also secretly admired him, or rather, she coveted Tiansheng looting, because she always felt guilty about Musian. She just now expressed her past thoughts about Musian frankly, because she had already given up and was ready to gradually distance herself from him from now on. But she didn't expect Musian to suddenly confess his love and even kiss her. Musian's confession now made her realize that both of them had thought about each other in the past. This was equivalent to putting the two of them on the same level again. I told you so much today, just hoping that you can understand. Musian held Yan Ruyu's hand again, gently pulled it, lowered his head slightly and leaned his face against her chest, and whispered, "It wasn't you who had any thoughts about your disciple unilaterally at the beginning. In fact, I was the same as you." Yan Ruyu looked at him infatuatedly. The original resistance in her heart gradually softened, and turned into an indescribable sweetness and joy. But I am your guide and your elder after all. Everyone in the sect knows about this. If it gets out in the future, it may affect your reputation." Her tone was full of complexity. "Besides, if Fairy Yaomeng or Ruoxi knew about this, I am afraid." Yan Ruyu had just finished speaking when she saw Musian raised his head and stared at her with an obsessed and gentle look in his eyes. He put his hand on Yan Ruyu's delicate and smooth face and whispered, "Master Yan, I will take care of this matter. You are the benefactor of my disciple when I first joined the sect, so no matter what, I will find ways to repay your kindness." "Do you mean to repay kindness by doing this kind of disrespectful behavior to the elders?" Yan Ruyu glared at him charmingly, but lowered her head shyly in Musian's affectionate gaze. She turned her face slightly away, not daring to look at the face of the sect disciple again. Now, whenever she sees Musian's face, she feels sweet inside, and inexplicably moved, as if she can't control her emotions. She doesn't know whether it's because of Musian's natural charm, or if she's simply attracted to this disciple. Warm reminder: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. But in short, if she looks at Musian's face now, she is worried that the next moment it won't be Musian who will take the initiative to do something to her, but she will be unable to control herself and take the initiative to be intimate with Musian. Yan Ruyu sighed secretly. If her senior sister knew that she was embarrassed by a big boy who was who knows how many years younger than her, and even let him kiss and hug her just now, I'm afraid she will inevitably be ridiculed in the future. In the future, when she quarrels with the senior sister who is now in Daofeng, as long as the other party mentions this matter, she thinks she will not be able to refute it. After all, this is the fact. But who cares about that now? In the bright courtyard, the rain was misty. The gorgeous dress outlined the beautiful figure of the beauty standing under the pavilion. She finally couldn't help but glanced at Musian shyly, slightly pursed her plump red lips, and her long and curled eyelashes trembled. Looking at the rain curtain, one hand subconsciously grasped the hem of her skirt, and she was extremely nervous. After all, if Senior Linglong saw the scene at this moment, she would really have no room for explanation. Although Yan Ruyu was a little nervous at the moment, in Musian's eyes, this woman's posture at this moment had a moving charm that he had never seen before. He finally couldn't bear it anymore, pressed Yan Ruyu's shoulders, led her back close to the stone pillar behind her, and then gently lifted her snow-white chin, presenting the charming face of the beautiful mature woman in his field of vision. Then, before she could speak, he lowered his head slightly and kissed her plump red lips. Yan Ruyu's eyes widened instantly, and then she looked at Musian with a dazed look. Slowly, she closed her eyes, her two little hands first suspended in the air, at a loss, and then gradually got into the state, tightly hooked around Musian's neck, her face becoming more and more flushed. When their lips parted, feeling the warm breath brought by the boy, Yan Ruyu felt her heartbeat speed up uncontrollably. Especially when his eyes were fixed on her, she felt extremely ashamed. She was actually being taken the initiative emotionally by a boy younger than her, and she was also embarrassed by him. This was not the attitude that the master of the library should have. At this time, Musian asked with a concerned tone, "Master, why is your face so hot, and why is your heartbeat so fast? Let me help you measure your pulse." "Get lost." Yan Ruyu glared at him, and became angry. This guy got the advantage and acted cute. It was okay to just kiss, but if he really asked him to measure his pulse, he would probably do it directly next. Although she had never been intimate with the opposite sex, she also knew what love between men and women was all about, so it was impossible for her to be deceived by Musian at the moment. "It's just a joke, I still know my limits." Musian laughed and did not do anything more excessive. "You have to know when to stop in everything. If you do something else, even if Pavilion Master Yan agrees, if Ling sees it when she comes out, it will be a big trouble." Although Lin Ling is a very innocent and good girl on weekdays, if she really encounters something that irritates her, she might say something like, "Musian has been obsessed with me for 3 days and 3 nights on the spot." Although the girl looks extremely delicate, she is a demon cultivator after all, and her physique is not comparable to that of a cultivator. Sitting in the courtyard, Musian put his arm around Yan Ruyu's shoulders so that she could lean on him. Even through the clothes, it seems that you can feel the delicate and soft body of a woman. It seems that because she is worried about being seen by Ling Long or even other chiefs, Yan Ruyu's body seems to be a little stiff at first, and it was not until a while later that she relaxed, with gentleness and sweetness between her eyebrows. She had already made plans to stay away from Musian in the future, but she didn't expect that things would turn out like this. At this moment, Yan Ruyu suddenly felt that the hand that was originally around her waist seemed to be getting a little restless. She could not help but hum lightly, rolled her eyes at him lazily, and said in a somewhat reprimanding tone, "What are you doing? I told you not to do it here." Although this is Tianhe Garden, Ling Long and the other senior might come out of the shower at any time. If she saw the intimacy between Musian and her, even if the two did not say anything, she would feel ashamed. "It's just a little cold, I hope to get some warmth from Pavilion Master Yan." After his purpose was exposed, Musian was not embarrassed, but held Yan Ruyu's delicate little hand very generously. Then, he remembered something important and asked, "By the way, Pavilion Master asked me to be careful of the Forbidden Land today, but did you get any news in advance?" How did Yan Ruyu, who had been in Lianji sect, know about the movement of the Forbidden Land? You know, even those ancient families did not know the movement of the Forbidden Land. But Yan Ruyu told him to be careful today. Your reaction is really sharp. Yan Ruyu raised her eyebrows slightly, as if she was a little surprised that Musian reacted so quickly. Just because of Musian's dishonest actions at the moment, her voice seemed to be a little sweet and lazy. She gently slapped Musian's hand away and said, "Don't make trouble. I'm going to talk to you about business next." "We are also doing business now." Musian looked serious. Yan Ruyu was embarrassed and angry, thinking, "What business are you doing now? Is there anyone who does this when doing business? You used to be in Tianqian City. Have you ever heard that there is a disabled village near Tianqian City?" Suppressing the shame in her heart, Yan Ruyu said in a calm tone as much as possible. Musian paused slightly and said calmly, "Why did Pavilion Master Yan mention that disabled village?" He remembered for no reason that when he was in the Blue Clan, there was a mysterious and powerful person who rescued Huang Weifeng. The great man seemed to have a disability and looked very weak. "I don't think I have ever told you that before I joined Lianji sect, I once studied under a great man with the head of Dao Feng." Yan Ruyu's inner shame gradually subsided, and turned into a kind of worry. "At that time, my senior sister and I thought that the master had fallen, but not long after you realized the truth, the master found me and my senior sister. The master of the Pavilion Master came for me." Musian suddenly understood. No wonder Yan Ruyu wanted to see him today. If it was because of the master's request, it would not be surprising. Yan Ruyu nodded silently. "I only knew recently that he is the supreme ruler of the Forbidden Land. Not long ago, he came to see me in the hope that I could lead you out of the section." The plump beauty said seriously, "I have tried it before, and it seems that master is also entrusted by someone to keep an eye on you, but as long as you are in the sect, nothing will happen." so don't leave the sect recently. Musian showed a thoughtful look. No wonder Pavilion Master Yan rarely came to Tianhe Garden, but suddenly appeared with Ling Er this time. At first I thought she missed me, but I didn't expect that she was worried about his safety. This can be regarded as her silent dedication to me. Musian's heart softened, and he suddenly sighed, it's too boring to let the disciple stay in the sect alone. I was originally thinking about traveling to Dongzhou. Yan Ruyu was anxious when she heard it. She frowned and was about to persuade him. At this time, Musian changed the subject and continued, but just now, the disciple discovered that there is actually a good place in the sect, but it requires the company of the pavilion master. It would be best if Ling Er and the princess were also there to accompany him. Under Yan Ruyu's puzzled gaze, Musian leaned over to her ear and whispered something. A little stuck, but I'll just get past it. Ask for a recommendation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 574. Soon after Musian arrived at the Forbidden Land of Life, he saw the girl who had been waiting for a long time under the ancient tree of life. She was wearing a rather complicated-looking black dress today. The dress wrapped her petite figure in it. It was a little less innocent as a little girl should be, but a little more mysterious. Muji's voice was clear and sweet. Brother, you are finally here. I thought you wouldn't come to play with me. If possible, I really don't want to come to such a dangerous place. Musian smiled and said, you are worrying too much. I said I would come to see you and I will definitely come, but I just don't know if it will disturb you. Muji stepped forward. One moment she seemed to be far away in the horizon, but the next moment she had quietly arrived in front of Musian, raising her cute face, and observing curiously with her clear and bright eyes. His face immediately smiled and said, that's what you say, but you're actually scared, right? You are afraid that after you step into the forbidden land of life, I will use the power of rules on you and keep you in the forbidden land of life forever, right? For Muji, this answer is not difficult to guess. From the conversation with Musian not long ago, Muji already knew that Musian really wanted to know who her parents were, and after she told Musian the truth, she even brought Muwanj back to life. After telling him about the Forbidden Land, Musian was still hesitant about whether to go to the Forbidden Land of Life. The answer is obvious. Musian was worried about whether he could get out after entering the forbidden area of life. This lowly queen looks innocent, but is she really worthy of being an old monster? He has completely guessed what I was thinking. Musian sighed in his heart and was about to say something. Actually, you don't need to explain. After all, if you weren't afraid of me, why would you ask Qing Emperor to protect you? Muji looked up at Musian's side with a smile. What do you think, Qing Emperor? As this innocent voice fell, a green silhouette quietly appeared in the sky beside Musian. In the past, there was an unwritten rule between the Forbidden Land and Kyushu, that is, the two parties did not have contact with each other, and the monks were not allowed to set foot in the Forbidden Land. I think Emperor Qing still remembers it, right? Muji paused for a moment and continued, oh, yes, I almost forgot that the Forbidden Land of Life was established long before the Yaokai Holy Land. From this point of view, it does not seem very strange that the Qing Emperor does not know about this matter. In fact, another meaning of this sentence is I am higher than you, so you have to show more respect in front of me. Musian originally thought that Yao Meng, with such a strong character, would fight back, but after hearing this, the corners of her mouth curved into a soft curve. Senior said that I did not know that there were such unwritten rules in the Forbidden Land and Kyushu. I'm sorry. But before a smile appeared on Muji's face, Yao Meng took Musian's arm and said with a smile, since the Forbidden Land has regulations that monks are not allowed to set foot in, then my husband and I will not. I'm sorry for bothering my seniors." When mentioning the word senior, Yao Meng deliberately emphasized the word senior, and then involuntarily took Musian's arm and planned to leave. At this time, a shackle suddenly flew out of the void, binding Yao Meng's wrist almost instantly, preventing her from leaving. "If Emperor Qing wants to leave, I'll naturally have no problem with it, but Big Brother can't accompany you back." Mu Ji raised her little hand behind the two of them. The power called taboo rules was like 1,000 shackles at this moment, restricting Yao Meng's actions. Yao Meng looked at Mu Ji's expression with great interest and said with a smile, "Is this the way the Lord of Life treats guests? From the beginning to the end, the only guest I have entertained is my eldest brother. As for Qing Emperor, to me, you can only be regarded as an uninvited guest at best," Mu Ji said unceremoniously, although her tone was crisp and sweet, but there was a bit of coldness in his eyes. To her, Qingdi was completely an obstacle that came to disturb her and Musian's alone time. If this obstacle can be removed before we enter the depths of the Forbidden Land of Life, it would be better to remove it as soon as possible. It was Yao Meng who brought me to the Forbidden Land of Life. If I want her to leave here, then I can only leave with her." Seeing that the atmosphere suddenly seemed tense, Musian exhaled slowly, looked at the delicate lowly queen, and said slowly. Hearing what Musian said, Mu Ji was obviously stunned. "Are you going to fall out with me for an outsider?" Although she knew the relationship between Yao Meng and Musian, she still underestimated the status of this woman in his heart, compared to the sister relationship that had no memory at all and relied only on Mu Ji's dictation. Musian still he chose Fairy Yao Meng, who was closely related to him in this life. Seeing that Musian had no intention of wavering, Mu Ji licked her pink lips, glanced at this mature-looking fairy with dissatisfaction, and said faintly, "Since Big Brother has said so, then you all will follow. I'll do it." There was a trace of displeasure in those light red eyes, and there was obvious dissatisfaction in his expression. "Actually, you don't have to offend a forbidden creature in a place like this because of me." Yao Meng looked at Mu Ji, who was flying alone into the depths of the Forbidden Land of Life, and suddenly said through a message, "If I don't tell you, even if she lets you enter the forbidden area of life, I'm afraid she will do something secretly in the future." After telling her clearly just now, at least some trouble can be avoided. Musian shook his head gently and also transmitted the message. "Actually, you're just worried that I'll get hurt, right?" Yao Meng's emerald-like beautiful eyes blinked slightly, staring straight at Musian, and suddenly asked. "After all, places like the Forbidden Land are the handiwork of Tiandao in the past. At present, people are unknown about everything in the Forbidden Land. No one can guarantee that the Ascension realm will not be injured." Although he was usually very caring towards the girls around him, it seemed like this was the first time he expressed his concern for someone so clearly like this. When thinking of this, the corners of Yao Meng's mouth curved slightly into a nice smile. If Musian is compared to a married wife, then the current Mrs. Mu is probably so depraved that she already favors Huang Mao. Musian remained silent. In fact, based on past experience, it stands to reason that when Yao Meng and Mu Ji had a conflict just now, he should have remained silent. After all, this is a forbidden place for life, and Mu Ji seems to be his fiancée since he was a child. Offending her is not a good choice. But just now he couldn't help but speak. Seeing that Musian was silent for a while, Yao Meng looked at him with a smile, his eyes as clear as a cold pool filled with joy and tenderness. In a sense, it was really thanks to Mu Ji's attack just now, otherwise, we wouldn't have seen such an interesting scene. You should really thank her. That's right, Big Brother. At this time, Mu Ji, who had arrived in front of the palace, suddenly stopped and turned her head slightly to look over. Under Yao Meng's indifferent gaze, Mu Ji smiled slightly. Eldest brother should be ready to marry me, right? Yao Meng's smile faltered. Get married? Yao Meng was still in a state of shock until he walked into the palace of the Forbidden Land of Life under the leadership of Muji. When he looked at Muzian, he seemed to be looking at a pervert. His usually bright green eyes were slightly dark, with a subtle expression. Unexpectedly, he not only controlled Sister Yu, but also controlled. Looking at Yao Meng's eyes as if looking at a pervert, even Muzian couldn't hold himself tight. He had no choice but to look up at Muji, who was leading the way, and asked, "Muji, what do you mean by getting married just now?" Muji was obviously deliberately retaliating for his favoritism towards Yao Meng, so she deliberately picked this juncture to bring up the matter of marriage. However, Muji didn't seem to hear it, and she pushed open the palace door with elegant steps, her hair flying in the wind, and her black skirt fluttering like a black butterfly. As if realizing that Muzian was not following, Muji slowed down and walked alongside Muzian. "You should have guessed what it means, so why bother asking me again?" She tilted her head and looked at Muzian innocently, stretched out her little hand to hold one of his large and warm palms, and said with a smile, "I gave you a hint before when we were in Dongzhou. With your intelligence, you should have already thought about my relationship with you, right?" Muji struck her palms as if she suddenly realized something, and as if she had thought of something, she turned her head and showed a pure smile. "Oh, or do you want me to mention it again in front of Sister Kingdi, so that she can where is my desire to marry you?" Muzian could hardly hold back. "Be serious, I'm not joking. I'm not kidding, either." Muji's tone became more serious. "I do plan to marry you this time. Muji, you should know that he is already married, right?" Finally, Yao Meng lost the patience to listen and said with a smile, "No matter who it is a bit inappropriate to get married twice, isn't it?" Although he was smiling, there was clearly a hint of danger beneath that smile. Besides, she paused slightly and said quietly, "Why did you marry him?" From Muzian's attitude just now, it is easy to see that he has no idea that he is going to marry Muji. After all, Muzian has never met Muji in the past, so how could he rashly marry a woman? The supreme marriage in a forbidden place? "It seems like you still don't know the relationship between me and eldest brother," Muji said in surprise. "Relation? When did he get involved with the Lord of Life again?" Yao Meng's beautiful eyes flashed slightly, and she stared at this petite-looking girl in a black dress calmly. Muji took 2 steps back with a smile on her face and lifted up her skirt gracefully. "It was really rude that I forgot to introduce myself just now. Please allow me to introduce myself again. My name is Muji, Mujian's Mu, by Zhizhi. I was taken to the Forbidden Land of Life by my mother. Although I didn't really want to become the Master of Life, I accidentally spent 2 years cultivating to the Hedeo realm, so I was forced to become the Master of Life in the end." He was born in the state of enlightenment, and it took him 2 years to achieve enlightenment. With such an experience, even if he is called a monster, it is not an exaggeration. Although it sounded like she was showing off, when Muji mentioned the position of the Lord of Life, a troubled look appeared on her face, as if she really didn't have much interest in the Lord of Life. If she had not become the Lord of Life and could not easily leave the Forbidden Land of Life, she could have followed Muzian when he went to Tianqian City in the past. But it doesn't matter now. After all, she has survived all these years, and Muzian has now reached the Forbidden Land of Life. By the way, the husband you mentioned and I grew up together when we were young. As if to retaliate against Yao Meng's provocation just now, Muji smiled slightly and said in a soft and gentle tone, "As for the relationship with him, my mother appointed me to be his fiancé in the past." Yao Meng fell into brief contemplation. Fiancé? She glanced at Muzian subconsciously, but saw that he rarely refuted, but showed a look of "it's true." This also made Yao Meng's heart sink. In fact, when he met Muzian in the past, Yao Meng had already vaguely guessed that Muzian's life experience was not as simple as it seemed. After all, How can a young master from an ordinary small family have a body that can continuously evolve, and even have been secretly cared for by concubine Shangyan in the past? If Musian is involved in the forbidden land of life, then many things can be explained. Maybe concubine Shangyan was entrusted by the forbidden land of life, so she always took care of Musian? Of course, there is another possibility. For example, it was not concubine Shangyan who was entrusted by the forbidden land of life, but the forbidden land of life was entrusted by concubine Shangyan? If it's the former, that's fine, but if it's the latter. Even Sister Kingdi, who was green all over the Musian fish pond, felt extremely subtle for a moment when she thought of a certain possibility. Just imagine, the moment Musian was born, the head of the Lianji sect was secretly paying attention to him, and then watched him grow up. During this period, concubine Shangyan would not be without any love rivals. She was completely "you can do whatever you want." A pure boy of that age, with concubine Shangyan's beauty and skills, I'm afraid she could be fascinated by him with just a finger. She could even train Musian into the shape she likes if she wanted to. Maybe when Musian was a child, he was given to concubine Shangyan. At this time, Musian's voice suddenly brought Yao Meng back to reality from his thoughts. Where is Mu Wanj now? Although the taboo said that Mu Wanj and he were not related by blood, Mu Wanj was indeed the person who watched him grow up, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with this. Musian now has many questions to ask that woman. Why did Mu Wanj seal him in the formation in the first place and didn't release him until this life? Then why did he be sent to the Mu family in Tianqian City? During this period, where did Mu Wanj go? Before Mu Ji could speak, the three of them suddenly heard footsteps. It was the sound of footsteps coming from behind the palace. Mu Ji stepped forward lightly and came to Musian, holding his arm and raising her head. With a little girl's longing eyes, Mu Ji looked straight at the slender figure vaguely visible behind the palace, and said softly, "Mother is out." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 575. Mother? When Yao Meng heard that Mu Ji actually called the woman who was walking from behind the palace as mother, a look of doubt flashed in her eyes for the first time. Even though Mu Ji looks like an innocent and pure little girl, in terms of longevity, Mu Ji is much older than Yao Meng. Otherwise, Mu Ji wouldn't have called herself Yao Meng Sr. just now. But now, she actually called another person mother? Yao Meng suddenly noticed a subtle change in Musian's expression, so she followed Musian's gaze and looked up at the woman walking from behind the palace. The footsteps seemed to be accompanied by the sound of bells clashing. After a while, a beautiful mature woman wearing a plain skirt came to the palace. Her face was covered with a pink veil, and her upper body was in a plain double-breasted coat, which outlined her beautiful and plump figure. The skirt added a bit of gentleness. Compared with her appearance, the flawless beauty of the prosperous age, but the special charm of a mature woman exuding at this moment is even more attractive. As she moves around, the jade earrings float gently. Her facial features are exquisite, her eyebrows are picturesque, her red lips are plump, and her pupils are a faint ink color, radiating with the gentle light of a mother's wife. Even compared to any high-quality fry in Musian fish pond, it is not inferior. As if aware of the three people's gazes, Mu Wanj raised her eyes and looked over tenderly. Then, a look of surprise quickly appeared on her face. Jier, have you brought guests to play? Her tone was extremely gentle, like whispering softly in the ear, making people feel as if a warm current surged into their hearts. However, as soon as I opened my mouth, I felt like the whole section collapsed. At least, it was completely different from the gentle and mature Mu Wanj that Musian imagined. Mu Wanj walked down the stairs in small embroidered shoes, with her fingertips in front of her red lips. She looked at Yao Meng carefully, pondered for a moment, and said, "Not long ago, I heard Jier say that Zhu is now appearing. She has met 3 people in the Ascension realm, and they are all related to Muir. Looking at the green dress she is wearing, could it be that she is the Qing emperor who was married to Muir? Yao Meng's eyes flashed with confusion. I wonder what I should call this fellow Taoist. Mu Wanj was stunned for a moment, with a puzzled look on her face as well. Don't you know me? As she spoke, she glanced at Muzian, who remained silent, and asked in confusion, Muir, have you never told Emperor Qing about my relationship with you? Muzian finally returned to reality from his thoughts just now. He shrugged and said as if nothing happened, you haven't told me who you are, have you? When he finished speaking, he looked up at the woman standing at the top of the stairs and said softly, this is only the first time we have met. That's not right. However, as soon as Muzian finished speaking, Mu Wanj whispered in a gentle and watery voice, actually, we have met many times when you were young. When I was little. Yao Meng looked at this gentle and sexy mature woman, and his mind fell into brief doubts. Soon afterwards, she quickly thought about Muzian's previous risk-taking attempt to step into the forbidden area of life. As if he thought of something, Yao Meng's eyes quickly changed when he looked at the woman on the steps. Are you Mu Wanj? In fact, Yao Meng didn't know much about Muzian's life experience. It was just that when he was intimate with Muzian last night, he mentioned the name Mu Wanj. Although I don't know who this woman is from Muzian, it is not difficult to guess from Muzian's complicated expression at this moment. You actually know me. Mu Wanj was surprised at first, and then soon, a look of surprise appeared on her face, and she said happily, oh, could it be that Muir mentioned me in front of you? If so, it is really happy. Woolen cloth. He just mentioned this name, but he didn't say anything about his relationship with you, Yao Meng said lightly. Boom. Mu Wanj seemed to be deeply shocked, sobbing and wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes. Muir has really forgotten me. I thought he still remembered everything that happened when he was a child, and he has always been reluctant to let me go. It seems that he has forgotten me. Is it really me who is being sentimental? Woohoo. Mom, have you forgotten that someone has cast a Taoist spell on his body to shield the secrets of heaven? Mu Ji finally couldn't help but speak. In front of Mu Wanj, the Lord of Life seemed to be quite well behaved, sensible and cute, but there was still a bit of helplessness in his eyes. That's right, because of the Taoist magic that blocks Tianji, I won't remember anything related to the forbidden land of life. Mu Wanj suddenly woke up, and then looked at Muzian tenderly. No wonder Muir forgot about me. Those gentle eyes made Muzian, who had seen strong winds and waves, feel a little uncomfortable. He tried his best to maintain his composure and said, why don't you take off your veil? Mu Wanj shook her head gently, looked at the already handsome child in front of her with soft eyes, and said softly, no matter who looks at my face, they will fall in love with me uncontrollably, even if it's the same for you. So for the sake of your health, let's just make do with it. Strange, she also has a naturally charming body? Mu Jian couldn't help but feel a little more doubtful. It stands to reason that there are very few naturally charming bodies, and even fewer naturally charming bodies can make people fascinated at a glance. At least among the people Muzian knew, only Shi Zixuan, the current ruler of the demon world, and who now possesses the body of a nine-tailed celestial fox, possesses the strongest charming body in the world. What kind of physique does Mu Wanj have? But before Muzian could continue thinking, Mu Wanj said softly in a gentle tone, right now, don't you have more important things to do than asking these questions? More important things? Before Muzian could react, the woman suddenly stepped forward and hugged him. She seemed not to care about the eyes of the people around her. She pressed the back of Muzian's head and gave him a soft facial cleanser. Of course the long-lost encounter should start with a hug, the woman said softly with a gentle voice. The soft and fragrant scent coupled with the gentle scent that seems to exude the brilliance of motherhood makes people subconsciously want to immerse themselves in it. Muzian closed his eyes subconsciously. Rather than the soft touch and the fragrance emanating from the woman, he was more concerned about his lingering sense of déjà vu. It was as if, I had been held in this woman's arms like this before. A very blurry picture suddenly flashed through his mind. It was a world that seemed to be filled with endless black mist, and it was impossible to see even one's fingers. My Muir is so cute. When he grows up, he will be very popular with girls, a woman said softly in the dark mist. The black mist dissipated, and the palace in the forbidden land of life appeared in the field of vision. The person holding him was still Mu Wanj, but Yao Meng and Mu Ji were gone, and Wei Mengru could not detect the slightest breath. Mu Xian suddenly looked up. This gentle, mature, and beautiful woman was hugging him like this. He was not even half of Mu Wanyi's height. He squinted his eyes, trying hard to see the woman's appearance clearly, but when he raised his head, he could only see a hazy face covered by black mist. It does seem that you have grown a lot taller than before, and you are getting more and more handsome. No wonder even a proud man like King Di would like you. At this time, Mu Wanj loosened her arms around Mu Xian, and when Xiangfeng left the table, Mu Xian came back to his senses from his thoughts just now. He raised his head and stared at the woman in front of him in surprise. Was what I saw just now an illusion, or was it a memory from the past? What is your relationship with him? At this time, Yao Meng's red lips opened slightly, and the cold fairy sound sounded, which seemed to create ripples in Mu Xian's heart, invisibly and quietly dispelling the charming atmosphere that Mu Wanj had previously exuded. Just as Mu Wanj said, she is indeed naturally charming. She didn't even take the initiative to seduce Mu Xian just now. She just hugged her and already exuded endless charm that was enough to make people intoxicated. Mu Wanj was a little surprised and said, "Is that Yaokai's meditation method just now? Can it still be used in this way?" Yao Meng glanced at Mu Xian inadvertently, and said in a pleasant voice, "There are still many places where the method of meditation can be used. Yaokai's method of meditation can make a person who is angry, sad, or possessed by desires wake up and calm down instantly. It can even make the enemy you are fighting have the idea of giving up the fight. You know, in a life and death fight, the momentum of both sides is a very important part. If used properly, if one calms down, it can be quite fatal to the enemy." Of course, when Mu Xian and Yao Meng were romantically involved in the past, this fairy would occasionally use meditation to calm people down instantly when Mu Xian was emotional. Mu Wanj naturally didn't understand the meaning of Yao Meng's words, but how could Mu Xian not understand it? He woke up from his emotion and immediately said, "You should know why I came to see you, right? It's okay to play with Yao Meng in private on weekdays. If Mu Wanj finds out about this kind of thing, no matter how big-hearted Mu Xian is, his heart is a little unbearable at this moment. My daughter has told me. You want to know what my relationship is with you, and why I left you in Tianqian City at that time, right?" Mu Wanj smiled and said, "If you don't mind, you can rest in the restricted area of life for a day. I will take you to a place tomorrow, you will naturally understand by then." Mu Xian opened his mouth and wanted to say something more, but in the end he fell silent under the woman's gentle eyes. Mu Ji happily threw herself into her mother's arms, smiling like a little girl. "Mom, can big brother sleep with me tonight? I haven't slept with him for a long time." Mu rushed to Yunzhou from Dongzhou today. He is inevitably exhausted. "Let him have a good rest by himself first," Mu Wanj said softly. Mu Xian seemed to want to say something more, but looking at the mother and daughter, he finally nodded silently. A maid in the palace quietly stepped forward and led Mu Xian and Yao Meng out of the palace. But from beginning to end, no one seemed to notice that there was a very inconspicuous woman in this palace. Wei Mengru. She had been staring at this woman since Mu Wanj appeared, with a look of uncertainty in her eyes. Because of what happened today, and the silver party just yesterday, Yao Meng did not disturb Mu Xian's rest, but gave him a space to be alone and calm down. Mu Xian was lying on the table, and suddenly he vaguely saw a pair of beautiful legs with tender white skin passing by. He looked up at Wei Mengru. Sister Mengru, why did you come out? Even Mu Ji and Mu Wanj probably didn't expect that Yao Meng was not the only one following Muzian. From beginning to end, Wei Mengru has been with Muzian. Wei Mengru said calmly, you were a little out of control when you saw Mu Wanj today, so I want to confirm your situation and report something to you by the way. Out of control. Muzian was stunned when he heard this, and smiled, I didn't cry or make a fuss today, so why did I lose control of my emotions? Wei Mengru walked to the table and then pressed Muzian's face into her arms. The soft touch made his heart beat faster involuntarily. At the same time, a cold hand reached through his robe and gently pressed against his chest. She lowered her head and whispered in the boy's ear, your heart is beating very fast now. Usually, any woman hugged you like this, your heart would beat faster, but today, when Mu Wanji hugged you like this, you didn't feel anything at all. Wei Mengru said faintly, because you have been thinking about who she is to you, why she sent you to Tianqian City in the first place, and what the purpose was, you were thinking about these things at the time, right? Muzian was silent. Even though there were many girls around him after leaving Tianqian City, it seemed that the person who knew the young master best would always be Wei Mengru. Because, she was the maid who had been watching him silently in the past. Muzian suddenly pressed Wei Mengru's shoulders and pressed her on the table behind him. The sudden action surprised Wei Mengru a little, but soon, a gentle smile like breaking the ice appeared on her face, which was particularly bright and moving under the dim candle light. Do you want to vent your emotions, master? Her cold voice was a little awkward, and she whispered, I don't mind, okay. Muzian's heart was shaken, and he hugged the maid's waist tightly, fully feeling the soft touch of her delicate body, and listening to the very rare gentle voice of the always cold maid, his heart became more and more hot. But before that, there is something I want to tell you first. At this time, Wei Mengru reached out and gently pressed on Muzian's chest, stopping him from wanting to be a dog. We can talk about anything later. With the beauty in his arms, and showing a different well-behaved attitude from the past, Muzian just wanted to have a good intimacy with the considerate maid. But Wei Mengru stroked Muzian's face and suddenly whispered, Mu Wanj, that woman also has the same personal interface as you. Just as he was about to lower his head to occupy the maid's red lips, he stopped abruptly. Muzian's expression gradually solidified on his face, staring at Wei Mengru dully. From Wei Mengru's eyes, he saw his own look full of astonishment.